Hospital reporters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hapanwo TV and welcome to this UFO Disclosure 2021. In this particular video I'm going to be inviting back onto the programme Steve Bassett, Executive Director of the Paradigm Research Group, for yet another interview. It's really great to get him back on the show. He's always a man I admire, whose judgment I trust and whose dedication is unquestionable. We're going to be talking about the UAPTF report, which of course you know from previous episodes in this series is a highly significant development in the history of UFOs and exopolitics, and possibly a beginning of the process of disclosure, or maybe even halfway along the process of disclosure. Time will tell. We'll bring Steve on shortly, but first of all I want to go through the exopolitical news that has been occurring since the last episode. In fact, I'm going to go back a little bit further because I didn't cover any exopolitical news at all in the UAPTF report video because it was all connected to that one event. So a lot has actually been happening since early June when I last did a UFO, my previous one to the previous one of the UFO disclosure, UFO disclosure possibilities. So there's been some weird things going on which I think are highly significant. One of them actually happened a few years ago, but it's just come to my attention. In Oxford Street in London, someone put up created a rather unusual bus shelter. This is just a simple open structure which is used so people waiting for a bus can stay under there, to stay in the shade if it's too hot and keep the rain off them. These all often have posters on them advertising. I mean, in fact they almost always do. There was one particular very interesting little gimmicky, I suppose, is it advertisers who do this sort of thing, or is it social experimenters? But one particular advertiser, it was actually for the drink Pepsi Max, decided to put a rather strange piece of viral marketing into their poster. If you go towards the if you walk towards the bus shelter and see the poster, it looks like an ordinary poster, an advertising poster. Once you get inside the bus shelter and look towards the panel where the poster is, you will see what looks like a window, just an ordinary window showing the street outside beyond. So it just looks like an ordinary, because a lot of these bus shelters they're not all surrounded by posters, they have windows in as well, and you'll think it's just an ordinary window on a bus shelter. However, it's not. It's actually a TV display. What it is, it's connected to a closed-circuit camera which is embedded within the poster on the other side of that panel. It's a very small lens. You can't really see it very easily when you see the poster from the other side, so most people probably won't notice it. When you're inside the shelter looking out, because this closed-circuit TV and the screen is showing you what you would see if it were a window, then it gets a little bit confusing. It gets a little bit confusing because you're actually watching a TV display. It looks very realistic, it's HD, it's the shape a window would be, and what you're looking at is an image which is coming from the camera, not from the window. So you may think, why would they do that? Why would they film something? Why would they film something that's there anyway? Why not just put a window in? The reason is because they've done this little experiment with what's called augmented reality. Augmented reality is basically showing you images from the real world. For example, what you're seeing now on this camera is an image of the real world, but then you add animation to it. So for example, an augmented reality version of what you're seeing now would be, for example, you could insert using animation, computer generated graphics, a big spider crawling up the wall, for example, something like that. A nasty big spider crawling up the wall. I wouldn't see it because it's not there, but you watching this would see it. Now, on this particular image on this bus shelter, guess what they put on there? Flying saucers. There were several other things as well, such as a hole opening in the ground and tigers and coming out of it and things like that. But most of the displays showed flying saucers. So someone sitting in that bus shelter looking at this, what they think is a window, will see the street outside and suddenly UFOs will appear in the sky above them. Now that is a bit alarming. Of course, the illusion will be spoiled immediately the moment the person gets up walks out of the bus shelter and looks at the street outside. They just see the normal street with no UFOs. But while they're looking at that display, they see a few UFOs, and possibly for a few seconds they might think they are looking at a real scene with flying saucers flying above them. And I just wonder if there's a camera watching those people. In fact, I know there is, because there's a YouTube video catching their reactions. Is it possible that the Isabel Menzies Lyths of this world today, the Tavistock Institute, the Stanford Research Institute, the Stanford Research Institute, and Common Purpose are watching how people react to suddenly seeing a UFO in the sky above them? Because they'll be gathering data on how people would respond to disclosure, or something fake, something false, a false disclosure. I wonder. Yeah. Either way, it's a really weird, it's a rather weird thing. You know, I mean, if you're in that situation, I mean, as I said, it's a billboard. It's sponsored by a company. It's sponsored by a company for advertising. It's a piece of marketing. I mean, would you, if you were just sitting in that bus shelter and you saw flying saucers and you thought the aliens were invading, would you be more or less likely to go and purchase a bottle or a can of a certain brown-coloured fizzy drink? I don't know. Right, there's something else, and now this is something which, again, rather like the alien invasion bus shelter, escaped my attention when it first appeared, but it's now come to my attention. It was actually Colin Woolford I can thank for this. This actually, last year, a film came out, a film called The 11th Green. I'd never heard of this before, and I'm really surprised, because when I watched the film I realised it's a film that could have been made for me. It's a feature film, a drama, which is all about, I won't give you any spoilers, it is really, really good. If you like Panmo TV, you'll love this film. It's about, it features, it's told partly in the modern world and partly through flashbacks. In the modern world, it features a journalist who's basically, his dad dies and he has to go and investigate. He has to go and sort out his dad's will and property and things like that, and his funeral, and that his father was a staffer in the administration of Dwight D. Eisenhower. And then there's flashbacks to Eisenhower in his post-presidential life, because it sets in the flashbacks are set in 1967, after a number of years after he was president, and how he gets on. He actually died in '69, so it's just before then. But basically, this film discusses the UFO cover-up. It's in a way which is really remarkably explicit. The filmmaker, David Munch, the guy who he actually wrote, directed and produced this film. He has researched the subject very, very well, and also he doesn't really present it in a way that's pandering to any kind of mainstream standards. He's literally putting this out there as if he were one of us. He's making it. In my review on Amazon, I said, made for ufologists. He knows an awful lot about conspiratorial ufology, and the film is absolutely unapologetic in the way it portrays this. It portrays UFOs as real. It talks about, and it even features an alien, the one that Eisenhower supposedly he met at Edwards Air Force Base. If you remember the famous incident, I think it was 1955, where Eisenhower supposedly went to the dentist and he wasn't at the dentist. He was at Edwards Air Force Base meeting an alien. This alien's called Lars. He's a Nordic, and he features in some of the. He actually appears in some of the scenes. Yeah, it's. What's even more interesting is the modern scenario, the kind of the narration point for the story, which involves this guy Jeremy, is he's a newsreader. He and his wife do a news show which covers a lot of esoteric subjects, and when the film starts, it's like on the eve of a disclosure event. They're just about to, some company's about to reveal something about anti-gravity. It's really quite remarkable. And then he has a conversation with this woman. I think, you see, I thought they may, because they lived together, I assume they were husband and wife, but maybe they're not, because later on he has another relationship. But she is very, very pro the cover-up. Which is interesting. She's like she's not within the deep state or anything like that. She's just a normal person. But his wife, or his co-host, very, very clearly explains why she thinks the cover-up is a good thing, why we can't handle the truth, it will make people panic, etc., etc. The society couldn't survive with this knowledge, things like that. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Now there's references to several real UFOs, for example, the Kecksburg incident. It's slightly ahistorical because it says it says that the Kecksburg incident happened in 1967, because Eisenhower's basically phoned up and they were asking for advice about the Kecksburg UFO crash. That actually happened in 2 years earlier, in '65. But we don't worry about that. We don't worry about that. Now there's also the rocket incident with Bob Jacobs, where a flying saucer shoots down a rocket. The Maelstrom Air Force Base incident, where Captain Bob Salas and UFOs switch off the missiles, things like that. Now what's interesting is Eisenhower in this film keeps having dreams where he meets Barack Obama as the future president. I don't know why they chose Obama and not Trump, because this was made in 2020. Maybe they're one of these anti-Trump people, I don't know. But interesting, Obama tells Eisenhower that he was shown a free energy machine when he became president by a strange military officer who appears to be some kind of alien. And there's all kinds of interesting lines, which indicate this person, Munch, the director, writer, producer, has really, really looked into the whole subject of exopolitics. For example, there's this line, someone at one point says, yeah, the people can see the UFOs, and maybe they can see them, but they will not believe in them until we tell them to believe in them. This is interesting. This takes me back to the kind of way that in which psychologists are looking into this. And it's no secret that psychologists have investigated beliefs like Professor Karen Douglas, who I've described I did an entire video about her, and I corresponded with her as well. There's this weird kind of, it's like they're just judging us and assessing us. That's what maybe that bus shelter was for. Maybe the bus shelter was a kind of War of the Worlds thing, because I believe this goes back quite a long way, and it could be that as long ago as 1938, when War of the Worlds radio show came out, this docudrama that people thought was real. Even the data gathered from the people's behaviour, which is quite extreme. People were rushing out of their houses, jumping in their cars and heading for the countryside in terror. They looted shops. It's a miracle no one was killed. I know some of the cars crashed and people were hurt. It's like the government people, that won't go unnoticed. That these things don't happen and no one looks at it. There's people within the psychological think tanks will be saying, what's going on here? And some of these, to be honest, they don't care if some of these experiments are dangerous. And this takes us back to the bus shelter, because what if someone saw these things and dashed out into the road in front of a car or something? They don't care. They don't care if people get hurt. They'll engineer these things. They really will. Yeah, I've watched it twice now, actually, because funny enough, when I was at the Awake and Aware, I know you haven't seen the video yet. That's going to come. I'm sorry I haven't uploaded it yet. When I was at Awake and Aware, I was staying at Dave Morgan's house, as you know, and I turned up. There was Colin there and a couple of other guys, and we watched the 11th Screen on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon for $3.99. Just rent it. It's good. It's worth doing. I don't know. It should be a big screen release, actually. I mean, maybe it was in selected cinemas. I don't know. But what's interesting is, well, I say it's interesting. The guys, of course, loved it, but the acting is actually really good. The actors, they're not like amateurs. They are mainstream actors you find in Hollywood. They're not like household names. They're not Tom Cruise or Sharon Stone or anyone like that. It's not mainstream names, but it is like still second level, highly professional, regular A-list movie actors. These are people you will find in big Hollywood blockbusters, playing supporting roles, for example, or even sometimes major roles. I must say, one of them, this did come up in discussion. One of them, is played by Agnes Bruckner, and I have to point out, like, she's very attractive. She's a very, very nice looking lady. If you just to let you know, but there was one of the guys I was watching. One of the guys who was there. There was four of us, and we were all blokes. And one of them was going. Every time she appeared on screen, he went, "Oh," he said, "Oh, she's lovely. Isn't she lovely?" Every time, and through the whole film, I think he was only interested in watching her, which is understandable. Understandable, yeah. Oh, just checking the time. All right. What's my computer doing weird things again? Hang on. Let's just get a different picture up. There we go. So we can actually just so we can see what's going on. So I was just checking this because my monitor screen actually is part of the lighting effect for this little studio of mine. All right, so Happy World Disclosure Day. I think I said that. Oh, I should mention, basically, I've already discussed this in my Bases at the Barge video, but Stephen Greer, Dr. Stephen Greer, his video, he has brought out a cosmic hoax, an expose of, and this is the his latest documentary, which rather unusually was uploaded immediately onto free sharing sites, YouTube, Odyssey, BitChute, etc. Oh, this is unusual for him actually. Normally he charges something to see, sometimes quite a lot of money actually, to see them originally, if you want to see them when they're first released. I always have mixed feelings about Greer and what he brings up in his little clips and his little videos that he makes. Well, they're actually quite sophisticated productions. He has a full team surrounding him. I always have mixed feelings about them. This one, I have to say, is his worst. It includes really some quite disreputable behaviour on his part. He is, and I'll be saying more about this later actually, because I had a letter, well, I had a round robin letter from him because I'm on his email list about this. But, you know, he's basically saying he's got all the answers, he knows what's going on, everything in new ufology is a hoax, Lou Elizondo is a shill, Chris Mellon is a shill, Hal Puthoff is a shill, Tom DeLonge is a shill. He almost has a Hawleyan kind of perspective. That's a reference to Richard D. Hall on the subject of other people within this movement. He basically says, yeah, all of new ufology is a hoax. It's all designed to promote the alien threat and set us up for the fake alien invasion. And if you hear people talking about it and they're not him, they're shills. I think that's his basic answer to everything. Now, I personally have never said we should believe everything that Elizondo, Mellon, DeLonge say. I've never suggested we should hang on their every word. But he doesn't have evidence to make these accusations. He doesn't. He claims he does. He gets Richard Doty to come in and say, "Oh look, well Richard Doty says this." Well, Richard Doty. Do you remember his history? Maybe some people involved in ufology today are actually not old enough to remember this. But he is a self-confessed disinformation artist. Just to look up the Benowitz affair. I've discussed this before elsewhere. I'm not saying that's poisoning the well, but I'm just saying that when he comes up with various things about my labs and stuff like that, I mean, I would rather have some proper proof. I think the attack on Leslie Kean in this documentary is absolutely contemptible. I think this is probably one of the most disreputable things Greer has ever done. I consider Leslie Kean, along with Greer, one of the most principal figures in this. I mean, and there's many others as well, but a lot of what we know about this whole subject today is because of her. She's been working on this almost for as long as Greer has. Her book, whose title I can't remember, which I should do, I've read it, is definitive. And it lays the foundation for a lot from a huge amount of research that's been built on top of it. Its generals, officials, etc. go on the record. What she's doing now with Ralph Blumenthal at the New York Times is extraordinary. Greer accuses Leslie Kean with zero evidence. and no one should be treated like that. But for someone, I think of Leslie Keynes, what she's contributed, the positive message, the positive effect she's had on this subject, I think that's particularly bad of Greer to do that. I really think that there's a lot of confusion over the word threat. I think Greer has made this point. I know a lot of people have talked about how people have been saying that UAPs are a threat to national security, and Greer says, no they're not, they're setting us up for the fake alien invasion, man. No, you see, in the parlance of military strategy, the word threat, it doesn't mean something you shoot at. It's not, you know, the real life is not like the movies. You don't see, you say, there's a threat up there, eat shit and die, motherfucker. Boom, 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 boom. A threat is not something you necessarily shoot at. A threat is just something which may potentially be hostile. It could be anything. And only a very small proportion of what the military strategists regard as threats ever end up in absolute full warfare. Now, from the position of a military strategist, UAPs are a threat, and it's perfectly legitimate to call them threats. Reason why? They are obviously intelligently designed. They're designed by something, not, as I said, I think everyone knows deep down it's not humans, but something is designing these craft that have abilities that could result, if it came to warfare, could result in a lot of damage for our side. These are craft, these objects have the ability to penetrate restricted airspace and secure compounds with impunity. They can fly down to bases where there are nuclear weapons, hang around, there's nothing anyone can do to stop them. They can outpace, outmaneuver anything we have in the sky, in the water, on the land. Now it is absolutely fair enough to say that that is a threat. It doesn't mean we're going to shoot at it, it just means that if you're in charge of the defence of the realm, you have to admit that that is a threat. And I think Greer has interpreted that word threat, as many people have, wrongly. Now I do have to add here that I'm not saying for 1 second that we should assume that there's not going to be some kind of manipulation to goad us into some kind of conflict which is not justified. The fake alien invasion scenario, what Carol Rosin calls the last card. I'm not saying that that is something we should ignore. It's not something, I don't think that is something we shouldn't be concerned about. It's not something we should be concerned about that. However, we really do have to weigh up the odds of taking, if we take Greer's position, and he basically says that it is definitely that, this is definitely 100% a program for the fake alien invasion, and I'll say more about that later, say when I analyse Greer's letter, and that if you believe what anyone says within it, DeLong, Elizondo, Mellon, etc., then you're just part of the problem because you are going along with the narrative which will lead to the fake alien invasion under last card. The last card, Carol. If you take that position, then you possibly miss out on an amazing opportunity. Supposing the truth embargo really is falling, supposing they've lost control of it and now there is a control process of disclosure, what we're experiencing is essentially the general public is experiencing a crash course in ufology to prepare them for full disclosure within the next year or so. Supposing that's the case, and you just sit around like Greer contemplating your navels and polishing your cannonballs, or maybe polishing his physical balls in his case, you know, you miss out on that opportunity. And we can't afford to. We can't afford, if this is an opportunity that's coming, we can't afford that. Which means we have to weigh up the position, understand that we actually don't know what's going on right now. We don't know which it is. And anyone who says they're 100% sure this is real disclosure, or they're 100% sure it's a fake alien invasion, is either being excessively naive or excessively cynical. And we have to walk a tightrope balanced between those two forces until we have more information. Otherwise we're going to come a cropper one way or the other. On the subject of the Greer's movie, though, I must say, within the film, you have an alien autopsy. The alien autopsy photo. Now that's very interesting, isn't it? It's a very old photograph that came to Greer via some person who contacted him saying it came from someone who was at the Manhattan Project in the 1940s. Where it was before then, no one knows, but the photo does date back to the 1920s, so it's at least 20 years old when it first came into the possession of people we know of. That's the paper trail goes back there. The photograph, it's been certified by people analysing the clothing and hairstyles of the. There's a number of men standing around a table. Some of them are doctors with white aprons on and things like that, and rubber gloves. Others are like in suits, you know, they're guys in suits, possibly government officials. But they are examining a strange-looking, very tall humanoid corpse, I think it is, on a table. And the corpse appears to be, well, I would say it's disfigured, burnt, something like that. Unfortunately, the photo is very poor quality. It's faded and it's clearly damaged. It's been folded. There's some water damage. Also, it's been scorched. We don't know, but the people, I don't recognise any of the figures in the photograph. I'm hoping that someone will come forward and say, "Oh my goodness, that's my granddad. He was in the Royal Medical Corps," or something like that. But that is a good one. To give Greer his credit, he did a good job digging that one up, I'm telling you. Okay, one more thing I want to talk about is Avi Loeb. As you know, I've got a lot of respect for Avi Loeb. Professor Avi Loeb is Professor Avi Loeb is the head of astronomy and astrophysics at Harvard University. He has a special title for his position. I don't know what it is, but he has started something called the Galileo Project. And this is very interesting. He clearly is taking UAP seriously. He did an interview like a couple of months ago where he sort of dismisses it. He's not very enthusiastic. His book, I mean, you may know that I reviewed his book Extraterrestrial for UFO Truth magazine. And the book was really amazing. It was an amazing book about Oumuamua and the evidence to suggest Oumuamua was alien technology. But it doesn't mention UFOs at all. And I thought that's kind of disappointing, because you would assume that UFOs would be an automatic development from the thesis of the original text, within the text, and he doesn't. Loeb won't go there, but now he will, and he's now going to do it. He started this thing called the Galileo Project, which is based at Harvard University. It's not some NGO operating independently. It's within Harvard University, and it's interesting that he calls it Galileo, because the Galileo Project, Galileo Galilei was, I think what they call him, was one of the most famous pioneers of science in the world, this Italian guy. In 1633 he was put under house arrest on the orders of the Pope, because supposedly of heresy, because he was giving a model of the universe that didn't fit in with the church's dogma. He actually spent the last the last 9 years of his life locked up in his house, in a home, unable to go out. And that's interesting. The motto of the Galileo Project is seeing the world through new telescopes. I think Loeb and the team he's assembled around him are implying that basically the modern scientific academic establishment is behaving just like the church for a few centuries past. Completely based on dogma rather than science. That's the implication. But he's going to do several things. Firstly, he's not going to bother with the government. He's not going to approach the government for more classified information. He's going to do this all independently through his scientific circles. But they're going to get proper cameras to photograph UFOs, because the military gun cameras are not ideal for that sort of thing. You need the kind of Win Keach style cameras. He's going to get hold of some of them. He's going to also get astronomical telescopes to search the sky for more Oumuamuas, because he believes that Oumuamua was not just a one-off. He thinks probably there are many of them, and they probably fly through the solar system regularly. As he said, if I see one ant crawling in my kitchen, I don't assume there's just one ant there. I think there's probably a whole colony nearby. Yeah, a swarm of ants. Yeah, a swarm of Oumuamuas. Now I wish them luck with this, because I mean Michael Saller has just tweeted actually that he says, yeah, but what about exopolitics? You know, what about the knowledge that we have before? And I know, I take his point. Michael Salla is absolutely right there. However, I still wish the Galileo project luck. I think it's great to see A.V. Loeb take this position, because he's already established himself as a name with the SETI bunch. Probably a lot of them will reject him now. I imagine Seth Shostak will probably start talking down to him now because he's gone over this area. But you know, Neil deGrasse Tyson will probably do the same. But I do think that this is a good step forward, because it may help alleviate some of the stigma associated with UFO research in the world of academia. So this could be a very revolutionary force within the world, the movement towards disclosure, I think. And so I wish him luck. Anyway, guys, that's the news coming. That's the all the exopolitical news that's going on at the moment. So if there's more, of course, I'll let you know. But and I will be covering some more news stories later on. But first of all, let's have a little word with Stephen Bassett.
Ladies and gentlemen, listeners to the Hapanmo TV and Hapanmo Radio, because you're both watching or hearing this at certain points. If you're on Hapanmo TV, it's hot off the press. I have with me the welcome return of Stephen Bassett. Hello, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing fine, Ben. Been a while. Lots happened since I talked to you last.
Yeah, it was November last year we discussed certain things. Now, since then, of course, everything seems to have changed. There's so much. I mean, there's so much going on. I hardly know where to start. But one place I think we can start, of course, is the UAPTF report, which has been released. Now, what's that all about, Steve?
Your listeners need to hopefully understand that everything they're seeing happening right now, by and large, is part of a strategic effort to end the truth embargo.
Right.
Each event is, you can't just isolate each event and try to assess, well, what does that mean and how important is it? You need to look at the bigger picture, and then it starts to come together. I've done now, as of, this will be my 100 and, this is, oh, wait a minute. This is my 100th interview this year, believe it or not, since January 1.
Blimey, you mean, so, amazing you can keep count of them.
Oh yeah. Everyone is important, because, as you know, in the modern world, when you do an interview, no matter whether it's a small podcast or a netcast or even CNN, it gets archived.
Yes.
Like a CNN mate will turn up on YouTube. 30 years ago, you could do a nice interview on ABC News, big deal, right? And then it's gone. Goes into the archives of ABC News, and if you want to find it, I mean, if you want to use it, you can call them up and they'll sell it to you for $5,000. So now interviews are all important. They all get archived. They all then start turning up in search engines, and that gives you a much broader reach. So I do podcasts. I've done lots of them, and I enjoy them, and they're important. So anyway, look, here's what's going down. For my friends in the UK, I need to get back there, by the way.
Hope you can come back soon. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a pretty complicated process underway in which the United States government is working to extricate itself out from under the truth embargo. That's a term I came up with back in the very early aughts to describe what everybody previously had called the UFO cover-up.
Yeah.
Because it's not a cover-up, and I hate the term UFO. So it's truth embargo. It's the 74-year 74-year policy of the U.S. government to simply deny and withhold the fundamental truth about the ET presence right now, engaging us. It's a big deal. So they've been having to lie about that for 74 years, and now the lie is coming to an end. And so what's happening is they're extricating themselves out from under it in order to get to where they need to be, where we need to be, and look good. They want to look good. They want it to go as smoothly as possible. I don't blame them for that.
Yeah,
I
they
really don't.
Politicians always do that. They have to spin things in a way that makes them look good, no matter what it is.
True.
There's
And
entire
that, but it's also,
professions.
yeah, it's also true for agencies like the Department of Defense or the Air Force, the Navy. Everybody wants to look good, and sometimes they have to do difficult things. That doesn't mean they can't work it to look as good as possible. That's the way to think about this. All right. I call it a public relations driven extrication process. And I don't think anybody should be shocked to know that in order to do this, they're going to have to lie some more. In other words, they're having to lie their way out from under the lie. Okay. So there you go. That's the overview. This process that we are now most involved in begins in October of 2017.
Right,
when
not
a group
December.
Well, yeah, no, it's a 65-day period in 2017 from October 11th to December the 16th. And over those 65 days, a group of people who had formerly worked for the military intelligence complex in the United States emerged, created a private organization, set up a website, announced that they were going to be engaging this issue in various ways. It was called the To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. We call it the To the Stars Academy. 65 days later, two major stories that had been provided to the New York Times to buy the To the Stars Academy were published on the front page. The authors were Helene Cooper, Leslie Kean, and
Ralph Blumenthal.
Yeah.
I remember it well, yes.
And Ralph Blumenthal, yes. A two-time Pulitzer Prize winner.
Yeah.
Those stories, when those stories hit, the disclosure movement, this effort to end the truth embargo, essentially crossed the point of no return. Or the Rubicon, or whatever you want to call it, meaning that there was going to be no going back, no reverse. It was going to be straightforward to the disclosure event.
Yeah, you can't go back from what's been said now.
You can't go back from that. You can go back in the previous years, over the decades, as you know, there have been some significant retrenchments. The most famous period of that was 1969. And the Air Force and the government thought they had a chance to get out from under the truth embargo and get some peace.
The Condon report.
The public was driving them crazy.
Yeah,
and so they held a 1-day hearing in the House of Representatives, just 1 day, 4 witnesses, a little bit of testimony. In 1968, they came up with the idea of a quote report, sort of a overview report, which came to be called the Condon Report, that came out of University of Colorado, that said it's no big deal. The whole thing was, of course, arranged in a whitewash. They used that report to close down Project Blue Book, which was becoming a problem because there were so many unexplained sightings that was getting to be awkward. And then, so they closed that down. And then they had already pretty much taken control of NICAP, which is a very important organization, the National Investigative Committee for Aerial Phenomena. They'd taken control of that. They threw Keogh out, and members of the CIA who were on the board basically wound it down, got rid of it. And so that all happened in 1969, and they were kind of free. They got out from under this, and so the disclosure movement took a real big step backwards for a number of years. It wasn't until 1978, about 9 years later, when Stan Friedman learned about the existence of Jesse Marcel Sr. living in Louisiana and was able to go and interview him about his role in Roswell. Did this, how would you say, retrenchment end? And all of a sudden things started picking up again. So there's been these moments, no more. For the last almost 4 years, we have been in a steady move towards disclosure. Now, it's been interrupted a little bit. It's been slowed down by the worst pandemic in 100 years. Who ordered that, right?
Yeah, good question.
It's been slowed down by really unprecedented time in American politics, which has had its moments, ups, and it's had its ups and downs too. But what we've experienced in the last 4 years, I've never seen in my lifetime.
I didn't expect it. I mean, I should point out that this represents a change of policy in media representation of the what UAP, whatever you want to call them. That before that, it was 70 whole years of basically the Cutler Twining memo and official ridicule and denial, and that suddenly stopped very suddenly in 2017.
Yeah, it doesn't fully stop, but let me tell you, it was a massive change, and since then, since that 65-day period in 2017, the Washington Post has done 36 articles on UAP related issues, and the New York Times has done 26. Think about that.
That's a lot, yeah.
That's a lot.
I've actually sent you a little image, Steve. I don't know if you can see it. It's a calendar. It's a calendar of the last 5 years. And every one of the red arrows you see represents a major revelation in this, what's been happening since the ATIP footage appeared. Having looked at that, I can't prove it, but I can't help thinking there's some kind of schedule involved here. Can you see the picture?
I do see it. It's nice. If you have, at some point, if you can send me the particular things that these arrows are pointing to, I'll review them. Is it a schedule or a schedule? Either one.
Yeah. Could be.
Sort of. Let's put it this way. As I say, this process of extrication out from under what has been a global truth embargo. I mean, let's face it, every country in the world has elected not to, and by country, I mean the heads of state of every country in the world has elected not to confirm the extraterrestrial presence for the last 74 years. No head of state has done it.
It's a very successful long-run international policy. There's not many that last that long.
It doesn't mean that it was all that coordinated. It was just essentially that's how it worked. And ending the truth embargo is, again, not something that can be how precisely scheduled. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that the emergence of the To the Stars Academy, and of course their initial decision to get those two articles into the New York Times and out the door, launched the drive towards. It was, I don't know how to put it this way. It initiated a process which I said was irreversible. And what you have seen over the last 3 years is individuals and agencies and publishers and news program producers figuring this out, getting the picture, getting the message, and starting to come on board. All right. You see it. In other words, it's just look that this public relations extraterrestrial projects is somewhat like a partially built plane was took off in October, December of 2017, and people are working to build the rest of the plane while it's flying. All right.
Right, I see.
So that it can land safely sometime, I believe, this year. So it's kind of like that. And what you've been seeing, what just the mainstream news coverage has demonstrated, is you're seeing these various entities getting on board this plane and getting in line with. So it's not exactly scheduled and it's not completely organized from the get-go, but it is coming together.
Right, that's interesting because when I first started examining this over the last few years, and I've talked to you about this before, I couldn't help wondering if the general public are getting some kind of crash course in ufology, and that's somehow intentional.
Again, as this thing moves forward, people are going to learn a lot just from the mainstream media. Look, I cover the mainstream media coverage of this, and I have for years. Probably no one has done what I've done in that area. Again, not small publications, little ones, kind of very small local publications. Not some of these fringe websites. Anybody can create a website. It's all, I mean, the total number of postings, as you know, regarding the UAP issue is massive.
Yeah.
No, I cover the mainstream press, which includes what you call the tabloids. Actually, they're not the tabloids like we have in the U.S., which are basically just nonsense. I mean,
the Sun and the News of the World,
the Examiner and stuff. Now you got the Express and the Daily Star and so forth in the Metro in the UK. These are legitimate papers. They don't make stuff up, but they cover a broad scale of entertainment for the British people. But I cover them. I cover all the mainstream publications here, including the New York Times, Washington Post, all of that. Since October 10th of 2017, I've now logged in and linked to 1,000 English language print articles regarding this UAPET issue, and essentially covering this extrication process underway. That doesn't count all of the foreign language articles. I can't archive those. It's just too hard to get them, to get the links to them.
They keep appearing in the oddest cases. I know a lady in the United States. She's not into UFOs at all, but she listens to a rock music channel, and she was complaining because they've started talking about UFOs on my rock music channel or things like that. And she's really surprised.
Yeah, no, it's everywhere. But I follow the mainstream because what the mainstream journalists are doing on this issue is very representative of where it is in terms of advancing towards the ultimate goal and the goal here, which is, of course, confirmation of the ET presence. There's over 1,000 articles are linked. And you go to my website, Paradigm Research Group, and you go to the resources section, and then you go to Print Media Archive. You can find all of these articles and read them all in chronological order, starting on October 10th.
If you got the time,
and if you did, go ahead.
Like I said, there's a link in the description box for or the show notes, whoever's watching or listening to this, where you can find Steve's website. So check that out.
And if you did read all 1,000 articles, you would know more than 99% of the population of the world about this, what's going on right now. And then, if you really want to be ahead of the curve, there is another section under resources, issues on my website, to the Stars Academy, and then slide over to TTSA Media. And there you will find currently about 160 video clips of coverage, as well as statements by To the Stars Academy people and so forth. It's a lot. And I need to add a 50 or 60 more. I'm behind in posting. Watch every one of those. Read all 1,000 articles, and then you'll get the picture. You'll be an expert on what the hell is happening right now. And what is happening, to be quite clear, Ben, is that we are rapidly, we are moving inexorably, and the pace varies depending upon what's going on. And right now, the pandemic is roaring back, and so guess what? The coverage is slacked off, and anything in the works is kind of being put on hold. I totally respect that. But we are moving towards disclosure, where the President of the United States, and the Prime Minister of the UK, the President of France, the Prime Minister of Canada, etc., President of Russia, President of China, are going to confirm to their people that, yeah, there's an extraterrestrial presence here. The phenomena you're seeing, a lot of that phenomena is ET in origin. It is not human-made. And hello, we're in the post-disclosure world, and then we'll see what happens next. That is where this is heading. And I'm pretty sure it's going to happen this year. It easily could have happened this summer. And I was talking about that early summer, but unfortunately, because of some very bad decisions made by very incompetent politicians, the pandemic is having a third phase, and it's going to go bad. And obviously, that is commanding the attention of the media and the politicians, rightfully so, because hundreds of thousands of more people are going to die unnecessarily. So that's the easiest way for me to sum up what's going down right now.
You did talk before, I think we mentioned this before, that sometimes a crisis like this pandemic that we've been having, could be exactly the kind of catalyst needed for the ending of the truth embargo. I mean, it would change everything. And of course, it could happen in the world before the pandemic, or maybe after it when it's died down, or it could happen in the middle of it, and it could have a positive effect. What do you think?
I've talked. Well, let me put it this way. I don't think the pandemic is a catalyst for bringing about the truth embargo. In fact, it has been a hindrance, a significant hindrance.
All right.
However, this pandemic has demonstrated some very powerful truths about the state of human affairs circa the 21st century and geopolitics. And the one thing it has demonstrated better than anything else, and that's something I've been talking about for the last 20 years, and you can find me talking about this in interviews 20 years ago, that the trust that citizens are placing in their governments has been steadily eroding since the early 1960s.
That's certainly true.
Now, obviously, the trust in government in authoritarian countries has always been poor. Hard to measure it because no one will tell you. In other words, if you go to North Korea and start asking people, do you trust your government? And they will look at you and with fear in their eyes and immediately leave the room. I mean, they can't even talk about it. So we don't even know, but I can assure you it's not good. The trust that the Soviet people had in the Soviet Union was very, very low. Everybody knew that. But in the democratic countries, where one might very well have a much higher level of trust by the nature of democratic countries or nature of democracies, that's been eroding substantially.
Yeah.
And democracies are fragile. They're more fragile than authoritarian states. Now, authoritarian states tend to conduct themselves in such a way that eventually they implode, often with great destruction. But they also can last a long time. Consider communist China. Democracies are much more fragile, and they tend not to last very long. It's not so much that they implode as that they fade away. So you simply can't allow trust to drop below certain levels. And in the United States, the trust in government has dropped to extraordinarily low levels for those that are paying attention to that.
Definitely.
The entity that probably best tracks this is the Pew PEW Research Institute in the United States. They do polling on this all the time, and I can tell you. Now, I think it's also happened somewhat in the UK. I can't say it's to the same degree as the United States, but I can tell you this: if the United States did not have a really strong constitution, a very loyal military that honors its oaths, we might be a failed state by now, because the level of trust that people have had in this government has dropped to levels which theoretically in other instances would have generated a failed state. A collapse, I guess you could say, an internal collapse. But we're fortunate we have that. But these institutions that were created 220 some years ago can only withstand battering. So the point I'm making is, if you watch how the public in the United States and in other countries, democracies around the world, are responding to this pandemic, hundreds of thousands of people are dying simply because they can't trust the government statement about the pandemic, government advice regarding, and so forth. They don't trust them. So if the government says you need a vaccination, their response is, well, if you think I need a vaccination, then I am not going to get vaccinated. If you think this treatment works, I'm not going to do that treatment. And they're turning to fringe sites on the internet and anybody that has counter theories based upon distrusting government for their advice. This pandemic has shown that. Now, this distrust that I'm referring to does not just extend to the pandemic. It extends to a lot of things. And so it's pointed out that the relationship between governments and the people have become dangerously corroded, and we need to address that somehow. And as I've said many times, there's really only one way to reestablish trust between two parties, is that these two parties, particularly the one in authority, has got to start telling the truth.
Yes, exactly.
Now you may say, well, wait a minute. In many cases, they are telling the truth.
Get rid of this. Sorry, someone's calling me on Facebook.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
But the governments do tell the truth. But they often do not tell the truth about extremely important things. And so it's one thing to tell the people the truth about, I don't know, the status of the crop yields, during a particular season, or what the Social Security Administration's policies are, whatever. That's one thing. It's another thing to lie about war. So when you lie about war, when you lie about war resulting in many thousands, or even millions of people being killed because you lied about that war and helped make it happen, that is a almost unforgivable thing. And that kind of lie can destroy trust, no matter what other small little truths. Now, the U.S. has done this. The U.K. has done this. And it's these big lies about life and death, truth and peace, that have helped to undermine this confidence. And, as we know, every government in the world, particularly the more developed countries, and obviously the UK and the United States, have been lying about the extraterrestrial issue for 4 years. Every day. And that's a big issue, right? You see what I'm saying? And so if you're going to start reestablishing trust, you need to start telling the truth about really important things.
That's
true. Yeah. I have said many times, telling the ET president is about as important as it gets. And so when governments start telling the truth about that, I think a lot of people may say, okay, that impresses me. Tell me more.
That's true, actually,
Yeah. And
it would be a breath of fresh air, as we say.
Yeah, to say the least. I think people will say, all right, keep telling me more. Tell me more. What have you got? And as that process unfolds, I believe it will go a long ways to begin reestablishing the trust bond between the governing authorities in the democracies and the people. Now, I believe that the authoritarian states will also tell this truth. Now, to what extent they stick with the truth as opposed to manipulating information following disclosure, I don't know. But they will also tell this truth. Now, what and what effect that will have, I don't know. It's hard to judge what happens with authoritarian countries. They're very, very tough to predict. But let's just talk about the democracies.
So we both are very, very aware of their public relations. You know, they were very, very aware of how the people, they both need essentially they call it in China the mandate of heaven, which is basically the people will follow them and they're worthy leaders, noblesse oblige. Because we have Boris Johnson as our prime minister now. Now he knows what it's like to be popular, because 2 years ago he was an enormously popular leader. Today that popularity has been decimated. He's now quite unpopular.
Let's face it, the pandemic generally has not helped the public status of just about any leader. I mean, look, if you're the leader and a pandemic arrives, it's not likely that somehow this is going to raise you in esteem. There are some exceptions. I believe the head of state in New Zealand has done such an exceptional job that she will be held in great esteem by the New Zealand people forever.
Jacinda Ardern,
yeah. But look, so clearly the presidents here are taking some serious flack as they try to deal with the pandemic, and there's almost nothing you can do that's going to be 100% effective. But let's take Boris Johnson. In other words, I do not know to what extent the UK government or Boris has misrepresented anything with respect to this pandemic. I don't know. It may be that they've been very truthful, but the pandemic has taken a toll and people are unhappy about that. I don't know. I know that Boris Johnson still supports the truth embargo because he's done nothing to advance it. Yeah. I know that as you go back in time, you've got some prime ministers who went along with American policy on war and peace when America was lying about it. And so essentially they participated in that lie, and they have been crucified for that. But again, I don't follow the social media in the UK, but I do follow the social media here. And I'll tell you, it's remarkable what people are saying about American government and policies and candidates and so forth. We are almost drowning in a social media ocean of propaganda generated not by the government but by the public. In other words, I guess you could say this is democracy, right? Look, I've got a lot of freedom here. And so if the government wants to put out propaganda, well, by God, I'll put out my own propaganda. If the government wants to make up stuff, I'll make up stuff. And that's something. I mean, there was a time when if you did that, you were done, right? In other words, in the past, there were governments panking out propaganda, particularly authoritarian states. And if you took the attitude, well, if you want to lie to us, then I'm going to crank out propaganda, and you got together a fax machine or something and started putting out your own propaganda, they came for you, and you were taken away and never heard from again. But that's not the way it is in America right now, or in a lot of countries. And the social media is what's made that possible. In other words, you can set up a website, get a podcast, mail list, whatever, and you can make up stuff and crank it out all day long, and they're not going to come for you in many countries, including the UK. So that's, I guess you could say, a kind of parody, but it's not the parody you want.
Yeah. Which, I mean, hopefully, like I said, if we do have like a disclosure press conference, that will help heal that situation as well in terms of the credibility gap between leaders and people. For example, I wonder if maybe that process is possibly beginning. The UAPTF report was released, and which is why I contacted you and asked you to come back to the show, because that seems to has had some kind of effect. It's a very short. It's only 9 pages. Well, there's 2 appendices and a title page. But when I first read it, I was thought, oh, I groaned. I thought it's just the same old bump again. But I reread it more carefully, and I suddenly realised, especially on page 5, there's something more. There's a lot of subtext to it. There's a lot of things that are hinted at. What did you think when you read that report?
Yeah, let's talk about the report. So, look, this report is, again, part of a much more complex strategy. It's three-dimensional chess going on right now. I mean, you've really got to work hard to be able to get a sense of what's happening on this three-dimensional chessboard. But essentially, as we talked about before, the events of 2017 set in motion a new inexorable process, ultimately leading to disclosure of the ET presence. And part of that process was the strategic decision by the initial members of the To the Stars Academy. Now, this was their plan pretty much all along, aside from setting up a website and a public benefit corporation and all that. They were going to get hearings. The activists in the field that I know pretty much all agree that we need congressional hearings to get to disclosure. It's going to be difficult to just jump to that. And most of the efforts that have been done have been ultimately done to help get to congressional hearings. There have been many attempts to get the Congress to hold hearings on this. I mean, something really substantive, not the one-day events of 1968, 1966, which is, by the way, what, 52 years ago?
Yeah.
And that is, I think, was the core agenda behind the creation of the Two Stars Academy. And the two people that have been pursuing that agenda with greatest vigor, Christopher Mellon and Louis Elizondo, who are now pretty much well known worldwide. And the agenda and the game plan that they followed was massively affected by the election of 2016 and later by the pandemic of 2020. So it slowed it down, but nevertheless, there was plenty they could do. And the two things they were doing that weren't particularly were not closed down by both the political and epidemiological events were these. One, Chris Mellon was up on the Capitol Hill in the United States briefing members of Congress. He was bringing witnesses along with him, military guys like the pilots of the Nimitz case and so forth, to talk with these members of Congress. He was focusing on members who sat on certain important committees, like the Senate Intel Committee or the House Intel Committee, not some agricultural committee. Those members, and they were being briefed privately. No press releases.
It's a bit like what you were doing a couple of years ago.
And I never got to that level.
Oh.
I had some meetings and stuff, and I let them know I was around, but there was only so far I could go. I didn't have the kind of gravitas and reputation and resume that Chris Mellon and Elizondo have. Never have. I'm just a populist activist doing what I can. They are heavy-duty people, and so Mellon, who has all this background in political defense, politics and defense on the Hill and within the Department of Defense, he's briefing his members of Congress. Now we know this because some of them have said, yeah, I got briefed, but they don't go into the details. He was doing that for perhaps 24 months. He briefed a lot of people. Now, there's only one reason that you privately brief members of Congress, and that's to prepare for hearings on an issue.
Right.
So that was going on. Meanwhile, the Unidentified show on the History Channel, it's called Unidentified: Inside America's Secret UFO Investigation.
I remember, yes, a pretty amazing program.
Sure, 14 episodes. And in the many months after that, Lou Elizondo was essentially vetting military witnesses. Almost no civilians. There's lots of civilian witnesses, but military witnesses. Many of them turned up on that show. Some of them in silhouette. But the consequence of the To the Stars Academy's emergence and the major articles in the New York Times and so forth, and the fact that the Nimitz witnesses and others had no consequences from coming public.
Yes, that's an important point, isn't it?
It's very important. Yeah.
It sets a kind of common law precedent.
Well, it lowers the bar. It lowers the bar for the thousands of retired military out there, maybe some active, as far as coming forward. Meaning, I saw something pretty amazing. I was involved in a significant incident. Looks like I could talk about that now. Apparently, it's okay.
It's a very, very important change of climate, I think, Steve. I mean, it's not just affecting the military. I think a sign of the times is Channel 7 Australia and their interview with Mr. Greenwood, the school teacher who witnessed a UFO in 1966. He's been quiet for 55 years, terrified, and now he's just sitting in front of the camera, full frontal face, talking away.
Sure. The Westfall incident, the Ruha incident.
Another school one. Yeah.
Zimbabwe. So civilian witnesses too are seeing what's going on, and they're more likely to come out, and that's fine. But it's military witnesses that are particularly important to congressional hearings, and so we don't know how many witnesses Lou Elizondo has interacted with, but there's some evidence that it's a substantial number. Okay, so let's put those two things together. Mellon is briefing members of Congress about the subject and exposing them to witnesses. Louis Elizondo is vetting witnesses. Well, where do you think that's headed? It's headed toward congressional hearings, isn't it?
Like a real life version of the citizen hearing that you did in Washington. That's
exactly right. So now that I've established that point, let's move forward a little bit. So as all this is happening, not surprisingly, all across so what I was trying to say is that not surprisingly, we expected some responses on the part of some politicians in the U.S. And there have been. A couple of them have spoken out, so forth. But the most important development that has emerged from this process that was put underway by the To the Stars Academy, and eventually, of course, was being focused on Chris Mellon and Lou Elizondo, who, by the way, have stepped out of the To the Stars Academy because
they're still on good terms, but they've left. They want to.
They stepped out because they had to, in order to deal with the Congress and ultimately get down to actually the process of negotiating these hearings. They needed to be independent of an organization. They couldn't be operating from a public benefit company. So they stepped out. So did Steve Justice. So the most significant thing that's taken place happened to involve a gentleman by the name of Marco Rubio, who in last year was the chairman of probably the most important committee in Congress, namely the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. He was the chairman. The ranking member was Mark Warner, the Democrat. So Marco Rubio reacted to the developments. He's a smart guy. He's run for president before and intends to run again, I assure you.
Yeah, he did.
He took action, and what he did was rather quite clever. He decided that he would put language, and it was his decision, by the way. He decided to put language in the appropriations bill, the Defense Intelligence Appropriations Bill, in the comment section, calling for a report from the Department of Defense and other agencies regarding the status of the UAP issue and how they're dealing with, etc. He wasn't demanding that they bring the Roswell wreckage and drag it into the Senate committee room. They wanted a report, and it was relatively substantive request. He put that in the bill in July. in the language, and it was publicly known in July of 2020.
He did a very interesting TV interview, I remember.
Sure, he's done that. A number of them have said some things on camera. But this was a very important maneuver. So the Department of Defense and other agencies, such as the Navy and the ONI, the Naval Intelligence at the Navy, knew as early as July of 2020 that they were going to have to produce a report. That gave them 1 year to strategize how to do it. Remember, strategic. That's something you got to keep in mind. Now, the report request had a 180-day, I guess you could say, window that started when the bill was signed. Now, Rubio knew that bill wouldn't be signed until much later in the year. And in fact, it was signed by the president. This is President Trump in December of 2020. And by the way, President Trump signed an omnibus bill, which included a lot of things and had in it this appropriations intelligence.
That's right. It was just inclusion, yeah.
So this is not Trump. This is Rubio's doing. And that set the deadline for this report as June 25. Now he requested, the Intel Committee requested both a classified and unclassified report.
Yeah, the annex, they called it.
They called it the classified annex. Again, I'm trying to let your listeners understand the strategic process underway. So the Office of Naval Intelligence, the Department of Defense, knew for 1 year that they were going to have to respond to this request, and the ultimate deadline was June 25 of 2021. So I assure you that everything that has happened over that 1 year period was strategic. It wasn't the Department of Defense sitting around going, oh, wait a minute, I guess we got to do a report here pretty soon. Somebody get on that. No, not at all. Now, in terms of understanding the strategy of the Department of Defense, your listeners need to know this. One, the Department of Defense does not want to provide information to the public about this issue, period. Nothing at all, by and large. On occasion, things have been put out. For instance, the CIA has, on several occasions, released a lot of files, which included some things related to UAP stuff. They did that, but this was not something that was going to suddenly generate disclosure or anything, but it was a show of good faith, meaning that the U.S. government is under constant pressure by the disclosure movement to do something, and by the media. That's been going on for a long time. That doesn't mean they're going to do anything, but they are in constant pressure. And some of these things they have released or what have you is a response to that pressure without getting carried away. But in terms of providing the people really significant information, they do not want to do that at all. Nice. Because telling the American people there's an ET presence is not their prerogative. They're not supposed to do that. This is not supposed to come from the Department of Defense. That is not their job, and it is essentially violates their role under the Constitution. So, okay, who does have the right? Well, the Congress doesn't have that right either. But the Department of Defense knows, okay, we don't want to tell the American people this, but if the Congress wants to go there, let them do that. And so what the Department of Defense wants to do is if they are called upon is to provide information to the Congress and then let the Congress decide what happens next. That's what they want. All right. Now, now, does the Congress have the right to tell the people about the ET presence? Not really. Who
Even
does?
with a hearing, even with a hearing.
Even with the hearings. That's right. Who does have the authority to declassify anything going on inside the United States government? Has that authority under the Constitution. In other words, any program, any USAP, to declassify what laboratories are working on anti-gravity. Only one person has that authority, and that is the President of the United States. So you see the strategy here? See what's going on? And so what the Department of Defense faced a bit of a dilemma when they got this, quote, command performance request from the head of the Senate Intel Committee. He demanded a classified and unclassified response. So what do you do, right? What do you do? And here's how they handled it. Here's how and again, this is absolutely strategic. Here is how the Department of Defense handled this. One, early on, they announced, not early on, but not too long ago, they announced that they were moving the responsibility for putting this report together to the Inspector General's office of the Department of Defense. Now, you have the equivalent of this in the UK, and I don't know what you call it there.
We have a defence staff. I mean, I don't know if there's equivalent to the Inspector General.
Well, let me explain what Inspector General is.
Okay.
Maybe it'll come to you. The Inspector General's office, and there are similar offices in many in agencies, pretty much most of the big agencies in the U.S. government. This is an independent office operating within that entity, but it's essentially independent of that entity, and its job is to review the activities of that entity, in this case the Department of Defense, as an independent legal entity, assessing whether those activities are violating the law or the Constitution, etc.
Oh, I see. Yeah, we have what we call those in Britain are watchdogs.
Okay. The Inspector General is actually a formal name here. It actually is a formal name under the law. In the publishing business, in journalism, we have a name for that. You probably have that too in the UK. They're called ombudsman.
Yeah.
Okay, ombudsman. And their job, and they actually work for the paper, their job is, again, to review with independent status what that paper is doing to assess whether it is getting into hot water or violating the law. So they assigned it to the Inspector General. That was to kind of take some of the, it was a public relations move in a sense, in order to minimize the public's distrust of what comes forward, what comes out. Right? Now, that's the first thing they did. Then they kind of put it out there that they might need more time, and they actually referred to like 3 months. In other words, we might need more time to do this report. That was strategic as well. All right. And then on June the 3rd of this year, the Department of Defense, almost certainly, it could have come from the Office of Naval Intelligence, but it probably deliberately leaked some key information to the New York Times.
Yes, they did.
And the New York Times was so confident in the source that they published it forthwith in the New York Times. And that article was published. You can find it on my website. I think it was published on June the 3rd. Now, what was in this leak? What was in the leak? Pretty much everything that was in the leak was they leaked some key information that was going to be in the public report.
Yeah, it was just basically a preview almost of the 9-page public preliminary report, wasn't it?
6-page actually, because there was one cover page and 2 appendices. There was only 6 pages of blah, blah, blah. And what did they leak? Well, they leaked that the two, they didn't say only, but I think 2 key points that would be made in the public report was, one, that in the many incidents that they reviewed, they did not find evidence for, quote, an extraterrestrial component. Actually use the word extraterrestrial. Okay, fine. And two, that the technology represented in some of these incidents that they reviewed, it was not possessed by the United States military.
Yeah.
Now, for most people, the average person, that's like, oh, well, that's interesting. For people like you and I that have been engaging this issue for many, many years, we knew how important that was. In other words, what they were doing was a George Tsoukalos maneuver. And I think
Ancient aliens.
Ancient aliens, right? George Tsoukalos. I think George Tsoukalos is pretty much known throughout the English-speaking world.
Yeah, he's a very famous guy. Yeah,
very famous guy. And what is a George Tsoukalos maneuver?
He goes, I'm not saying it's aliens, but it is aliens.
That's right. And so what they were saying in this leak was, we're not saying it's extraterrestrials, but it's extraterrestrials.
Yeah,
because
it's subtext, isn't it? It's reading between the lines.
But it's indirect, right? It's not direct. And why is it that? What do you mean, Steve? Why do you say that? It's not hard. Let me assure the fine citizens of the United Kingdom that the United States has the highest level of military and defense technology, as high or higher than every other nation in the world, all 200 nations and sovereign territories.
That's
right?
correct, yeah.
Be assured of that.
Famous for it, yeah, it's famous for it.
Yeah. The China doesn't have higher level than that. Neither does Russia or the UK or Peru or Somalia or Cuba or any other country, period. And so if we don't have it, nobody has it. And if nobody has it, what does that leave? Okay, so that was leaked on June the 3rd. Okay.
The comparison I made, Steve, was the only time you could get that level of technological disparity between humans would be if one of us from our world went and visited a Stone Age tribe in New Guinea or somewhere and showed them our modern technology, which does happen sometimes. There's some videos of that.
Yeah.
Within the sort of civilized global community, you would never have. On page 5 of the report, they actually say things such as, they describe some of the maneuverability and speed capabilities of these objects in great detail, the multi-medium, transmedium travel, signature management. In other words, it's radiating, but it's radiating in an organized way. It's terms of.
Let me extend that analogy you just came up with. And so, yeah, we went back in time and we're cruising around New Guinea. I don't know, say 5,000 years ago, and we've got cell phones and computers and whatever, and we hang out there for a while, then we leave. Or no, we're hanging out. Meanwhile, the tribe leaders of these various primitive tribes back then are all sitting around trying to figure out which of the other tribes has come up with this tech, right? It can't be. It's got to be. And of course that's ridiculous, but that's what we're seeing now. So, all right. So now let's continue the strategy that the DoD is following. So here's what the DoD did next. They released the classified annex early. They released it before the known, quote, deadline of June the 25th.
Oh, really?
Oh, yes.
Not to Congress, I assume, not publicly.
To Congress. They released it. Well, I say they released it. They went to Congress with they turned over the classified annex to Congress on June the 16th and possibly June the 17th.
I didn't know that.
And briefings were held. Again, you can find the articles about that. Just go to my website and look for articles.
Right. I knew the intelligence. I know the Intelligence Committee had them, and I was waiting for one of them to leak it. But no, okay.
Well, no, they briefed 4 committees.
All right.
And not just any 4 committees. They, not surprisingly, they briefed the House and Senate Intelligence Committees and the House and Senate Armed Services Committees. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot of members.
Yeah.
And they got briefing and they got video and there's some uncertainty, but there was some talk that it was a 73-page report. now some research has been done, and it seems like maybe it's been only a 17-page report.
Well,
It's
that's-
possible. It's possible they got two reports. They got a 17-page report, and one committee got a 73. But I think we can say at least it's 17-page report. So they released that took place on June the 16th. It was covered. The press noted it, and so it was publicized. But it didn't get a lot of attention because everybody was focused on the June 25th deadline, right? And so the effect of that was that these committee members were able to review this information without a lot of press running around the halls of Congress trying to get answers. In other words, it gave them some time. And so for the next 9 days, they had opportunity to digest whatever was in the classified report. Okay. Now, then on the 25th, the public report comes out. Not surprisingly, it wasn't much.
Yeah.
They could not do that. They could not give. Some people were expecting some 500-page analysis as well as statements about files and what we have.
What's their budget? Is it $9 million or something they've had in over 6 months? I mean, well, presumably they're not spending that money on hookers and cocaine, are they? I hope.
Well, no, I don't know what the budget. Well, they have a huge budget. I don't know how much
it's a lot of money.
on this. They didn't spend that much on this report, I assure you. I mean, they didn't spend much at all. They didn't need to.
I could have written that within about half an hour.
Yeah, but they've got the money. But so they weren't going to do that. But they had a problem. Hang on a second.
All right.
Sorry, for some reason I couldn't undo my mic. Okay.
No problem.
Yeah. So, but they had no choice because Rubio requested a public report as well. So they had to do something. And they put out this minimal thing, which just happened to confirm the leak that they deliberately put out on June the 3rd. And they put that out, and that was it. And then shortly after that, they mentioned, yeah, but there's more coming in 90 days. We have another report coming, more for you in 90 days. So they put out this minimal statement. They knew they were going to get a lot of flack and complaints about, wait, what? This is nothing, right? We ordered a full 7-course meal. You gave us a small salad. That bought them time. All right. Again, you're seeing the strategy here.
I see. It's a kind of a feint. It's a smoke screen, isn't it?
Not a smoke screen. It's a strategic maneuver as this to try to keep the Department of Defense's role in this where they want it to be as we move inexorably towards disclosure. And so, where is the situation as of June 25? Okay, the Republic's gotten something, all right, and the request has been honored. Rubio then said something about, well, I'm pleased about that. Mark Warner then said something about, well, it's not not Mark Warner, but Chris Mellon made a quick statement. Well, it's glad to see that. It wasn't as comprehensive, but whatever. In other words, they got that out of the way. But let's be clear. The Department of Defense knows full well that you provide a classified report that has that much public interest to 30, 40, 50 members of Congress, it is going to leak.
Yeah,
they know that.
Although it'll be a far more serious offence to leak the classified annex than just a preview of the public report. However, if, for example, this is what I mean by common law precedent. If, for example, someone was caught, went to court and they were acquitted or given a very light sentence with mitigation, that would be a big domino that would knock a few others over, because that would give other people confidence to come forward, I think.
Well, let me take this a little further, Ben. Let me explain. Look, if some individual within the Department of Defense were to go to the New York Times and leak a bunch of that classified annex, they'd have a problem. But when you give a report to Congress, if it leaks, there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Okay, period.
Oh, right.
Okay. There's not a damn thing they can do about it, and they know that. Well, I am quite sure they wanted it to leak. Right? In other words, if the Congress decides to leak some of this to the press, that's on Congress. That's not the DOD. Are you you seeing where I'm going here?
Yeah, they actually want Congress to leak some of the classified annex.
Yeah, if Congress wants to leak it, let them leak it.
Right.
In other words, we're headed towards disclosure, and the Department of Defense is maneuvering in such a way to keep itself out of hot water, to look like it's cooperating, to sort of help the process within a certain framework. They're very smart over there. They have huge resources and massive supercomputers. They can game any scenario you want, okay?
Yeah.
And they have done that. All right, so be assured that let me see. I'm gonna bring up something here. Okay, one moment.
Sure.
Hang on a second. I'm going to have something very interesting for you in a second here. You're going to love it. Okay, so they know that's going to leak. And then then as it happened, and this was an accident, and the most important committee, as I've said, is the Senate Intelligence Committee and the Senate Armed Services Committee, and the House Senate Intel and Armed Services comes second. It just so happened that the day after the June 25 report, the Senate went into recess and weren't due back in Washington until the 12th of October. And they're back now. But what that means is, as of the 12th
of July, yeah.
Of 12th of July, the Senate had that committee had the classified annex for 26 days.
Right.
Plenty of time to decide what to do, plenty of time to plan, and so forth. All good. So that's your strategy, that explains, I hope, as well as I can, the larger picture of what's going on. So those that have just read the public report and are out trying to understand what's going on, or they're upset about it, or whatever, you can't. That's not enough. You've got to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, when the Senate came back into session, it would have been not surprising at all if Marco Rubio, the ranking member of the Senate Intel Committee, or Mark Warner, might have then said, look, we're going to hold hearings and set a date even. Okay. That didn't happen. What did happen is that while the Senate was in recess, another committee chair of a lesser but not trivial committee, Andre Carson, Democrat from Indiana, publicly said, we're going to hold hearings.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But he's the chairman of the House Intelligence Subcommittee on Counterintelligence and other issues. Important committee, important, but a subcommittee. So you might say that he may have gotten ahead of his skis there a little bit, but nevertheless, he kind of let at least one cat out of the bag. So he calls for hearings, but that's not going to do it. The Senate Intel is probably the committee you need to watch. So, but by the time that the Senate is back in session on July 12th, there had been other developments. And there were three developments. One, major pieces of legislation were starting to move towards action, and very controversial. And I'm talking about the voting rights bill, related bill, and of course the infrastructure bill. These two alone are huge. And secondly, they are completely tied up to the Senate, which is 50-50 split in the United States, and the Senate filibuster rule. So this is a big deal. And so all of the Senate, all of the members of the Senate, including those who sit on the Senate Intel Committee, they are dealing with that. Secondly, the pandemic by July 13th had started its third wave, and we were beginning to see that it was going to be bad. And so that literally started dominating the news here, and it's been dominating it ever since. And so it just was not appropriate. It would have been a very bad move for Mark Warner or Marco Rubio to in mid-July say, yeah, I think we need to hold hearings on the UAP issue. It wasn't going to happen. So that's delayed it.
Oh, dear.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right. Meanwhile, the first leak may have turned up.
Was it?
Oh, yeah. From the annex. Now, this leak, let me tell you about this leak. This leak comes courtesy of Richard Dolan, one of my colleagues, and of course, an extremely well-known person worldwide on the subject matter.
Oh, yeah, I know him well, yeah.
Yeah. Richard Dolan has his sources. One of his sources, who he does trust, approached him and said that they had been given information by somebody associated with the briefings in Congress. Could have been a staffer, and it could have been a member of one of the committees. He trusted the source enough that he felt he would go public with the leak. Now, keep in mind, and he made it clear he hasn't confirmed this leak. In fact, nobody's confirmed this leak yet that I'm aware of. And then keep in mind that this leak, essentially what I think is happening, I think Richard agrees, is that this leak was verbally given to Richard's source, who wrote it down, gave it to Richard, and then Richard put it up on his, he put it up in one of his podcasts. So again, we're not talking about a page of the annex being passed through to Richard Dolan. This is information verbally passed on, written down, passed to Richard, and then Richard puts it out. So let me read you what may be a legitimate leak from the classified annex given to many members of Congress on June 16th, June 17th of this year. You ready?
Sure, yes.
Okay, again. All right. The classified portion of the UAP report given to a select number of congressmen and senators and congresswomen relates to the following. 1. Energy pulse propulsion system projects, ion propulsion systems, anti-gravity propulsion systems, antimatter propulsion systems, ramjet hydrogen propulsion systems, compressed nuclear propulsion systems, advanced use of exotic elements for energy research, parentheses, ET-related items.
Oh.
The Kaesong Energy Propulsion System Research Project. All right, you with me so far?
Yes, I think this rings a bell. I think I've seen this, but go on.
Okay. All right. And then these two paragraphs. All these highly classified projects are under the control of the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, DARPA.
All right.
And being managed by a classified group called Advanced Group 6. All funding for these projects is black confidential funds appropriated under intelligence operations costs. Some funds come from private contractors. And then the final paragraph, and this is where it gets really interesting. Prototypes of flying crafts utilizing the above technology are being flown at Area 51 and Tonopah Air Force Base test range. This is Nellis. Some of the UAPs observed in and around Nevada can be contributed, and of course, what is meant to be said is attributed, all right? Which gives a certain authenticity to this, given how it was transmitted through to Richard, can be attributed to crafts using the above propulsion systems.
That's
However,
incredible. Some of
None
Bob
of the
Lazar was talking. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. However, some of the experimental crafts have flown. However, none of the experimental crafts have flown outside the Nellis test and training range. None of these experimental crafts can be attributed to the sightings photographed by the U.S. Navy.
Right. Now that's important thing, isn't it? Because some people, Dr. Stephen Greer has made a video about this, a film, are saying that this is part of a false flag alien attack.
Whoa. I'm not reading anything about false flag here.
Okay.
It says nothing. There is nothing here that raises the issue of false flag.
Well, in a sense, it negates it because
Well, if it's a false flag, they've just spilled the beans. Look, no. Everything here in this supposed leak is well within what the researchers in this field have been trying to understand for years. There's nothing here that's particularly shocking. All right.
yeah.
But what's shocking is that the Department of Defense has given this briefing to the members of Congress, knowing it would be leaked.
Yes, yeah. If it's genuine, yes.
Yeah. So let's sum up what this leak. Now, understand this is like, I don't know. This is barely a fourth of a page. Right. So this is a sum of what was in at least 17 pages, and it may not, and it's probably not everything that they were told. But what do we have here? Well, first, it appears that the DOD has briefed key members of Congress on the propulsion systems we are working on. Right?
That's
Okay.
right, yeah. And they mention ET, don't they? Actually say ET.
Well, they say ET with respect to one thing.
Yeah.
The ET is mentioned with respect to advanced exotic elements, metamaterials, right? We've heard about those. We know about that.
Yeah, of course. Bigelow's research project, and
So they seem to confirm. Yeah, they seem to confirm that the materials we've been kind of hearing about may be ET related. Remember, this is a verbal to written to Richard process here. So maybe it should have said maybe ET related, whatever. But ET is mentioned there. That's notable. So they're saying, yeah, these are the propulsion, and one of the propulsion systems they mentioned is anti-gravity. That's really significant, isn't it? Okay.
Extremely, yes. And
then, okay, so they're telling the Congress this is what we got. Second, they make it clear that at least some of these propulsion systems are actually being flown. All right? Not necessarily all, but some of them are actually being tested as in flown.
Yes,
now, which ones it doesn't say. But I have a good feeling that anti-gravity is one of the ones that's being flown. I feel real good about that. I don't know about antimatter propulsion systems because that's one hell of a technological challenge. All right, so they said that. Okay. Then they said, as far as these propulsion systems that we are working on, we don't test them outside of the Nellis range. Meaning, we're not flying them over the state of Arizona in 1997. You following me here?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, in other words, the Phoenix Lights. Yeah, and Bob Lazar actually and John Lear and other people talked about the test flights that took place at Area 51. Do you know there's a new video just come out showing something happening at Area 51, like a blue light, something like a blue light flying above the airbase. Have you seen that?
I haven't, but these things are coming out, and then they're also kind of saying, and we don't fly these things around aircraft carrier groups, U.S. aircraft carrier groups.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
That's what they're saying. So you combine that with the public statement in the June 25 report. While we don't see anything extraterrestrial and the cases examined, the technology exhibit is not something we have.
Well,
Right, now you put all that together, and what do you get?
But it is something they have. But
No. They're saying here that we are to testing antimatter propulsion systems. Okay, fine.
Right, yeah.
That we may be flying those, but we only flying over the Nellis Range.
They're experimental.
And the technology exhibited in those events is not something we have. Meaning, look, we got antimatter, but what we've got can't do what those Tic Tacs do.
Yes, that's right. The preliminary report said that it's not something from the United States, but it may be more precise to say this is not something we have developed to the point where it can be deployed operationally.
Okay, so what else does that imply? Well, yeah.
Then they're of non-human construction. If humans aren't making these things, they're of non-human construction.
But it's something else it implies. Where did we get the technology? Is it possible that what we are doing with respect to antimatter propulsion may have been assisted by the acquisition of extraterrestrial crashed vehicles?
That is perfectly possible. I mean, as you said, especially the material element. I mean, there are individuals who worked on anti-gravity, and usually before the mid-1950s, there were experiments. I know in Germany, they were working on it big time in the 1930s. There's been other enormous scientists like Thomas Townsend Brown and George Pigott dating back to the early 20th century. However, it's possible that some of it, I don't discount the fact that they weren't helped along, especially considering the mid-1950s, the whole thing went secret.
More than helped along. Look, the ET issue is known as fact. Known as fact to governments, most of the governments of the world, no later than early 1950s, and for many countries, no later than 1947. And we've been seeing them fly around for the entire 20th century. So a lot of smart people figured out early on, these are extraterrestrial and they're anti-gravitic. And so once you know that anti-gravitic propulsion is possible, you start thinking about how to do it. So whether you're a garage inventor in 1938 or just a private person or a company, you're thinking it can be done. Let's look into it. I think if you read the book American Cosmic by Diane Pasulka, you learn something that I think is probably true, that secretly for decades, private entities with great resources have been working to create anti-gravitic craft themselves, completely off the grid, even in a sense more private than the government, because how do you approach a fully secret private entity with a Freedom of Information Act request? You can't do that. And so I think that's about to emerge. But the point here is that we know they have a crash vehicle. We know they have more than one crash vehicle, starting with Roswell. I mean, that's been proven. That's a fact. People don't believe it. That's their issue.
Yeah,
and so they're basically confirming, we got anti-gravitic crash vehicles, and we've worked with that to develop anti-gravity. I don't think without those crash vehicles they could have been testing anti-gravitic propulsion as early as we think they tested it. We got films going back to the 80s, and so that is implied here. So again, now I've pretty much described most of the strategy that you're seeing unfold, which is leading ultimately to those hearings, which is going to lead to disclosure by the president. But there's another thing going on that your listeners need to know about that is part of the strategy, but possibly not something that the Department of Defense wanted. A flanking maneuver is going on simultaneous with this compliance with the Senate intel request and the report and the briefing of Congress and all that, over at the Inspector General's office of the Department of Defense. How did it come about? I don't know the precise details. I know enough that I can sort of describe it, but I may have to alter my thoughts on this. But here's how I think it went down. Over the past 3 years, well, from the beginning, the moment the To the Stars Academy was launched, a whole lot of people at the Pentagon, CIA, pick an agency, Air Force, Navy, immediately saw that website and said, this is not good. This needs to be stopped. Who do I call? What do I got to do? We got to kill this baby in the crib, right?
As you said, they don't want the Department of Intelligence. They don't want the Department of Defense Intelligence. Don't want this out of the bag.
Whatever, they don't want it out. And again, I'm not picking on any particular entity. I'm saying across the military intelligence complex, there were plenty of offices and individuals that said, and I'm sure they started making phone calls. How can we stop this? Now, this was a problem because I believe that by and large, the military intelligence complex was caught with their pants down on it. I don't think they saw it coming.
No,
they might have got.
Yeah.
Okay. I just don't think they did.
No.
We know the Department of Defense's public office didn't know what to do. They were immediately hit with requests, and they didn't know what to say. They kept saying things that were completely false. I don't think it was deliberate. I think they didn't know what the hell was going on.
Well, certainly no one I know in the ufological community or exopolitical community saw this coming.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any. I didn't.
No,
I'm paying about as close attention as you can. I mean, I'm following certain lists, right, of people that claim to have all kinds of inside contacts. This was not mentioned.
No.
And so I think they caught him by surprise. And so, okay, so the gear started moving, grinding inside the military intelligence complex, which I like to call the MIC, if you don't mind. Okay, let's stop this. But before they could put together some effort to close it down, and this is, I'm sure, quite intentional, the To the Stars Academy team had already delivered major stories to the New York Times. The New York Times is already vetting those stories. And so 65 days after the launch, the New York Times put those stories up in the front page. And this isn't 1980, right? They didn't put up a picture of a picture from the gun camera footage clip of the Tic Tac, a picture on the front page, and then that paper was thrown away, and the picture was put in the archive, right? And then people put the paper, or maybe they put it in their bird cage. No, we live in a web-driven, internet-driven media world now. And so they put the actual gun camera footage up on the New York Times webpage. And that now has been seen by has had billions of views worldwide. So the moment those articles hit the New York Times paper and the New York Times website, the prospects of stopping the To the Stars Academy ended right then and there. There was nothing they could do. All right?
Cat's out of the bag. Yeah.
So that doesn't mean they were happy about it. And so I was watching and waiting for some kind of significant effort from the military intelligence complex to somehow end the disclosure process vis-a-vis Mel and Elizondo and overall the TTS. And I wasn't seeing it. It just wasn't happening. And so as the time went by, the articles poured out, the debunkers went and hid, the skeptics started to, well, there wasn't much of that. There was some. It was all embarrassing. But nothing what I would call any kind of draconian effort. However, as we started to get closer to the report, in other words, I think the Department of Defense and people inside the military intelligence complex knew that once those reports got issued, it was really game over. And so I think that as we approach the classified and the unclassified reports requested by the Intel Committee, I think there was some sort of last-ditch effort within, particularly the Department of Defense, to gaslight Lou Elizondo.
Really?
So, yeah, I think they were swapping emails and phone calls and stuff, and basically just gaslighting him. Now, there'd already been some things that had happened that were embarrassing, but that was early on. And Lou spent 20 years in the Army undercover in intel operations in some of the most dangerous parts of the world. Okay.
That's right, yeah.
If anybody who's looked at Lou Elizondo knows that Lou Elizondo is not going to be intimidated by some desk jockeys. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, definitely not. No. He's
So
boots.
what he did was brilliant. I think he used this gaslighting as a basis to legitimately approach the Inspector General's office.
You talking about his lawsuit because he's suing.
Well, yeah, you're getting ahead of me, but yeah, it's
sorry, yeah, okay,
yeah, it's all right, it's all right. Meaning, I got a legitimate reason to approach the Inspector General's office. Now, remember, the Inspector General's office was assigned the responsibility for vetting and putting out this report, right? This is a very important report. So so being able to engage the Inspector General's office could be rather useful. So he does, and he raises these concerns about how he is being handled and treated by certain people within. The names of the people that were gaslighting him have not been revealed, but apparently they are known. And he files a complaint. Okay, that's cool. And while he's in the door, I think he also may have raised some concerns independent of the gaslight that, maybe they weren't doing enough about this report or whatever. Okay.
Oh, I see.
Okay. So far, so good. But then what he does is, I've got a legitimate problem here that has legal implications. So I'm going to hire a world famous legal activist to represent me.
Yep.
And that, of course, was
Danny Sheehan.
Now, let's talk a little bit about Danny Sheehan. Aside from the fact that he has 4 degrees from Harvard, Danny Sheehan, back in the 20th century, set up a activist nonprofit called the Christic Institute. And the Christic Institute basically started getting involved, and he personally started getting involved in some of the biggest cases of the second half of the 20th century. He took on the nuclear industry in the Silkwood case. He took on the Department of Defense in the Daniel Ellsberg Pentagon's case. He took on Harvard in the John Mack case, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. I invite people to Google Danny Sheehan and the Christic Institute. He drove the government nuts. And as a result, the government pushed back. And they were able to, how would you say, drive him out of town by a fairly simple maneuver. They just started looking into the finances. They can use the IRS to do that anytime they want. And so they said, we want to see the books, and looked into the finances. And then they took all that to a judge and said, Judge, we've looked into the finance of the Christic Institute, and it looks to us like they're not operating appropriately under the nonprofit for nonprofit laws that we have, and therefore we want it stripped of its nonprofit status. Hump. And I'm sure they picked a favorable judge, and the judge eventually gives out a verdict that yes, the Christic Institute is violated the laws regarding the conduct of nonprofits. You lose your nonprofit status, and now you owe the government taxes and fines on every dollar you ever raised.
Oh no, that's a
Are you
lot.
following me here?
Yeah, that's a lot of money.
Yeah, okay. Well, that bankrupted the Christic Institute and put Danny Sheehan in a pretty tough spot. My understanding is that, and he's done, well, this is just one of many things that he did to help advance the disclosure process and help people like Danny Sheehan. Lawrence Rockefeller, I believe, is the one, and I may be, and there may have been more than one, but Lawrence Rockefeller stepped in and paid off that debt, allowing Danny to leave town and reset up on the West Coast, where he has been conducting activism ever since and involved in some important matters, but nothing at the, how would you say, the level of the kind of cases that he was involved in the 20th century. So your listeners need to know that. So hiring Danny Sheehan was a message to the DOD, gentlemen, I'm just not here to play canasta. But
yes.
it gets better. Now, Danny Sheehan's a smart guy. In the year 2000, Danny Sheehan came out on the UAP issue. He came out with his involvement in it. And when I learned about it, one of the first things I did was I arranged to get him on Art Bell Show to talk about his involvement in it. And ever since, for the last 20 years, Danny Sheehan has appeared at numerous conferences, has given tons of interviews, and completely made it clear to the world that he is involved in this issue. This issue is important, and lend it whatever gravitas he has in the eyes of whoever is viewing him.
I remember him at the Greer's conference in 2001. Yeah.
Yeah, he's been in. He was at my. He was part of the citizen hearing on disclosure. I mean, he's been all over this issue for 20 years. Now, I've never asked him this, and I may one day, but he's a really smart guy, and I'm just speculating here that Daniel Peterson Sheehan calculated no later than 2020, the year 2000, that this issue was not only the most important issue in the world, but one day it was going to be the biggest news story in the world.
Well, yes, of course.
And so, not surprisingly, 20 years after he came out on his interest in this subject, Danny Sheehan is now at the center of one of the most important news stories and government matters in human history. Are you following me here?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. And so, boom, Danny Sheehan turns up. Well, what happens next is that I'm sure with Danny's help, the team of Luis Elizondo and Danny Sheehan are suddenly engaging the Inspector General's office on a rather broad basis. Let me tell you how broad. Now, this is directly from Danny. He said this publicly, so this is not conjecture. At some point, and this is so Sheehan, this is so Danny, he persuaded the Inspector General that, since we're having these discussions about whatever, Lewis and whatever else going on, that the Inspector General's office is quite large. It is. It's very large. I mean, look, the Department of Defense budget is larger than most of the countries in the world. So it's huge. It's got many divisions. He said, well, look, since we're going to talk, why don't you bring in the heads of all of these divisions so we can talk with all of them at the same time? And so at some point, according to Danny, Lou and Danny are in there, and in front of them are the heads of all the divisions of the Inspector General's office, and they're chatting it up about whatever the hell they want to talk about. You see where that is? That's going on simultaneously with the report being put out and the Congress reviewing it and everything else. It becomes a flanking maneuver, and then Danny starts talking about it publicly. He's been talking about it on numerous talk shows. He's been talking about it on a number of, what do they call these, virtual conference type meetings on the web.
Yeah.
All right. And I have to assume that certainly he has Lou's permission to do that because, of course, he's his lawyer, and therefore attorney-client privilege requires that Lou give him a permission to do this, which means that whatever the hell Danny's up to, Lou is on board with it.
I see what you mean about three-dimensional chess.
Yeah. Okay. And so that's happening. Now, the message here that I get from all of this, and I think we'll wrap up with this if you don't mind, Ben.
Sure, we've been going quite a long time, Steve, but yeah, carry on.
The message that I want to leave the listeners and viewers of your show and the fine members of the United Kingdom, for which I'm very fond. I've had so many good times there and so many people supporting me there.
Yeah, I've been to a few of the times you've been there too. So.
Oh yeah, Benny, I intend to come back. Trust me, I intend to come back and talk to some very large audiences in the not too distant future.
Brilliant.
I believe the Department of Defense of the United States of America has essentially thrown in the towel and acknowledged defeat.
I think that's very wise. They know when they're beaten.
In other words, look, we know the game is coming to an end. We acknowledge the outcome, disclosure, and we accept it.
Good.
Now,
yeah.
And it's not our job to hold a press conference and announce there's ETs here. I assure you that would not go very well, assuming it could even happen, because it's extra constitutional. But we are essentially going to cooperate, and we're going to handle our cooperation in such a way that we do not embarrass ourselves, that we do not step out of line, and hopefully we get as many public relations points with the public that we can get, so that when the announcement does take place, we will be thought of kindly by the American people and others, which is exactly how you would expect them to conduct themselves. And that is true for the Navy. It's true for the CIA. It's even true for the Air Force, which has remained almost completely silent on this issue. And I understand why. They have the absolute worst record on this issue. They are going to take the worst heat from the American people over their conduct. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be intolerable. I'm simply saying that of all of the entities, Air Force, Army, Navy, CIA, DIA, Department of Defense, etc., the Air Force has the worst history on this. I'm not saying it's nefarious. I'm simply saying that's the way the cards played out. So the decision the Air Force has made is, look, just don't say anything at all. Don't attract any attention. Keep your head down, and we'll deal with the public relations problems when this thing finally breaks. That's not a bad choice. If I were them, I might do the same thing. So there you go.
Sweeten the pill, give them let them back down by saving face. They'll be a lot more cooperative.
Well, yeah, look, they could jump in and try to help out, but if they raise their head above the parapet and say, look, yeah, we got something too. There's a lot of people going to say, oh, really? You want to help? You closed down Project Blue Book, lied about that, lied about Project Grudge, all this stuff, and then you withheld all kinds of other evidence, including the nuclear weapons tampering. I mean, you've done all this for all these years, and now you want to help. So I think they're going, look, let's just keep a low profile. All right, let's let this unfold. Let the DoD and the Navy, the O&I, whatever, let them move this thing along. Let the Congress move it along, and then at some point when it breaks, we'll deal with our role in it. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's right. So again, let me repeat. This is from Steve Bassett, who has an office in the National Press Building, 2 blocks from the White House, that has nothing to do in his life but read all the articles and watch the relevant videos on this to try to assess what the hell is happening, even though a great deal of what is happening cannot be publicly acknowledged, formally acknowledged. Okay, The United States government, which is to say the Department of Defense, the United States Navy, at minimum, has thrown in the towel and accepted the fact that disclosure is not only inevitable, but is likely to happen very soon. And that's how I invite your listeners to interpret all developments going forward. Every news article, every statement by a member of Congress, there have been a number, every action by a committee, every statement from the DOD, as well as statements from the key principals such as Christopher Mellon, Luis Elizondo, and others. And if you keep that in mind, it may make sense.
Yeah. I mean, normally I'm a little bit more dubious, and I think, now maybe it's not going to come that soon, but this time, Steve, I think I'm with you on this. I think it really, the momentum, I think, is really, I can feel it. I can feel it really pushing us along.
Right. And at one point it was intense, but as you know, the epidemic is roaring back. Major political matters are being dealt with in the Congress right now. This is not just business as usual, let me tell you. Right. And so if I were a senator, I don't care what I was told back in mid-June, I would not, Andre Carson aside, I would not be talking hearings about this right now. I would wait and see, because these bills are going to get the filibuster is going. The filibuster matter is going to be resolved pretty soon. I think they're going to eliminate it and they're going to pass these bills, though it's not certain because again we're at 50-50 in the Senate. Even with the filibuster eliminated, that doesn't mean they can pass. But I think they're going to get passed, and once they're passed, that is a huge change in terms of the situation in Congress. Doesn't mean that everybody's going to be lovey-dovey or anything. Oh God, no. But those bills are major. And then the pandemic is going to, this third phase will peak. We're starting to see a very intense effort across a range of entities within the United States. I don't know about the UK, to try to break distance. And at some point, I think it will happen. One of the things that's likely to help that breakthrough take place is the variant is starting to infect younger people, and they're getting pretty sick. And so when many of the people on the fence start learning that kids in their teens and young adults in their 20s are getting very sick and possibly dying from this disease, I think that may be the deciding factor. And they're going to say, look, we simply have got to make a decision here. And I think they will get vaccinated and things will improve.
So when things calm down, basically, in the government at the moment, when they've got some more, maybe some clear space, do you think they could have UAP or ET hearings? Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully that'll be soon, Steve.
Watch for more leaks from the classified annex. Definitely watch to see if Richard Dolan gets more confirmation of that leak or gets another leak. And if he gets word that was a hoax, I'm sure he'll say so, and I'll say so, and we'll try to find out who tried to hoax him. I think it's about a 10% chance that could be a fairly good but false leak for some reason. I can't imagine why, so I'll give it a 10%. And then watch for any other statements regarding hearings.
Right.
Watch for them. And we'll see what happens. All right, we'll see what happens. Okay.
Definitely. I appreciate you taking the time, Steve. We've been talking now for close to 2 hours, and I appreciate you taking this time. I really do. I'm sure the listeners and viewers will find this very interesting. And stay in touch. And if people want to find out, you still got the Paradigm Research Group website. That's still going?
Yeah, paradigmresearchgroup.org. Go there. You can find the print media archive. You can find the video archive that will give you huge amounts of mainstream information about this last 3 years. Also, please follow Paradigm Research Group or Steve Bassett on same Twitter account. Follow me on Twitter. You can also follow me on Facebook. You can follow Paradigm Research Group on Facebook. So, or me, do that, please. Also on LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, feel free to ask for a connection on LinkedIn. And I'll try to keep people informed as best I can as we move forward in what will be possibly an extraordinary year
Yeah, I
in
think
the
it
history of the human race.
will. I'm more certain of that now than I have been in the past. I agree. I think it will be. And so, ladies and gentlemen, do follow Steve on those various places. Steve, I hope you'll return when there's news, because this is moving very quickly. I'll keep in touch with you, and hopefully get you back on the show another time, and we'll give the listeners and viewers an update.
Certainly, Ben. And I look forward to getting together with you if I get to the UK, maybe much later this year. But I think at some point I'm going to be over there.
Oh, brilliant. I look forward
All
to
right.
that. Thanks
All
very
right.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
And that was the one and only Stephen Bassett, the Executive Director of the Paradigm Research Group, talking about his position on the UAPTF report. And I'm very, very interested to see where this goes, indeed. In the meantime, before I leave you, there's a couple of other little news stories I want to discuss. So we'll go straight over to my studio to go through those. Right, well, let's go into the current exo-political news. Well, the major news story, I think, is one that I did touch on in my basis talk, and that is, of course, his messianic royal muscliness, Dr. Stephen Greer, and what he's been saying. I received, I do subscribe to his mailing list, and he sent all of us an interesting little, what's the word, ditty here, called the DNI report on UAPs, and UAPs is in quotes, UFO cover-up 2.0, right. Well, this is an interesting little development, isn't it? Because, well, UFO cover-up 2.0. He's suggesting, as I've said before, as I explained in my basis project lecture, that Greer really regards everything that's happened since 2017 in new ufology as a hoax. I'll go into detail. He goes into detail in his little letter he sent here. And luckily, doing his voice is quite easy, so you can always tell when he's speaking and when I'm speaking. Yes, I'm Dr. Stephen Greer, your Messiah. Who dares stand spread before me? So that's not him talking, that's just me taking the mickey out of him. Here we go then. The DNR report on the so-called UAPs, brackets, a man-made psyops name created to obfuscate the truth, is, as predicted, the usual government cover-up, but with a twist. Actually, UAPs, it's a made-up psyops name created to obfuscate the truth. That, I don't think, is the case. The term UAP actually was adopted in Britain first. It's during the time of the Condign reports. It dates back quite a long way. It's probably being used, according to Nick Redfern, it was being used from sometime in the 1970s onwards. And the reason they adopted the name UAP, indeed the United States adopted afterwards, was very simple. The term UFO really was no longer considered appropriate for official government memos and documents and internal correspondence, etc. Because UFO is weighed down by a massive amount of cultural baggage, which, well, frankly, is associated with the likes of you and me. Ironically, the term UFO was actually devised by the Robertson panel in 1952, where they met, I think, 5 years after, in July of that year, 5 years after Kenneth Arnold, to investigate the whole thing. And they decided they couldn't just sit there talking about flying saucers, so they made up a new term which sounded scientific, rational, and governmental, called UFO. Well, that didn't last long, did it? And it appears actually UAPs have been, the term UAP has been culturally appropriated by the tinfoil hatters like us. So the government probably will come up with a new term at some point. I suggested AONHCs, artificial objects of non-human construction. I think that is sober and unequivocal enough and uncommitted to any outcome or conclusion that it would suit them, I think. So yeah. He goes on. Since the mid-1940s, the US government and others has simply denied the significance of the subject via Project Blue Book, the Condon Report, and other operations staged to give the appearance of a real investigation. The government has simply denied the matter is real or of significance. That's actually true.
what he's saying here is completely true. Project Blue Book was a whitewash, as was the Condon Report in 1969, which after the best part of over 22 years of non-stop investigation through Project Sign, Project Grudge and Blue Book, was simply designed to, it was intended to distract people from the subject, draw people's attention from the subject that everyone already could see, and confuse them and misinform them. Ironically, the same thing was done in the early 1990s with the crop circle issue. They used the same technique. Pat Delgado and Andrew Collins have written about this, how they were basically brought in to investigate crop circles under government agency supervision, but at the same time they were doing, the government were doing their own investigation nearby, which was believed to be the real thing, whereas Delgado and Collins, through no fault of their own, it wasn't deliberate, were unwittingly used in a cover-up. Yes, in fact, the equivalent of Collins and Delgado was a guy called J. Allen Hynek, who came in as a skeptic. He began to realise that UFOs were real, and then he realised that there was a cover-up in operation, and he'd been brought in basically to play his role within it, as the TV drama based on it, which hopefully will get a third series soon, talked about. This time in UFO Cover-Up 2.0, the DNI report calls for further study. Doubtlessly this will be a staged, a dog and pony show like the 1960s Condon report, during which Professor Condon of the University of Colorado was on the payroll of the CIA, and we have the documents proving this. But this time the so-called further investigations are beginning with one true premise and 3 huge lies. Now, I'm actually open to this idea of UFO Cover-Up 2.0, as he calls it. I think, as I've said before, Greer is probably jumping the gun a little bit here. And he's also, I question his motives, quite frankly, whether he's a bit annoyed that the spotlight is no longer on him, as I've explained in previous videos. But Condon was Professor Condon of the who chaired the committee, CIA officer. Yeah, he was actually working for them, and what he said here is absolutely true about the Condon report and the committee that ended Project Blue Book. However, he's basically saying that the exact same thing is going to happen again. History's going to repeat itself, and the whole DNI revelation is simply a part of that. Now, I'm not so sure about that. I think it may be different this time. Anyway, let's go into the 3 huge lies. The true premise is that the UFOs are real and not simply misperceptions of other known craft or phenomenon. Yes, true. The 3 big lies. First, that we do not know what UFOs are, but we do. A cursory investigation of the existing evidence, testimony, and so forth proves what Lockheed Skunk Works director Ben Rich concluded in 1986. There are 2 types of UFOs: R's, or man-made anti-gravity propulsion vehicles, and extraterrestrial. Case closed. That is actually true. That is actually true. They will probably, the initial disclosure press conference, which is increasingly likely. I think it's the likelihood of it happening is increasing, actually. And over the last few months, that likelihood has increased. Is going to include something like that. They're going to include something like, yes, these are AONHCs, artificial objects of non-human construction, but we've just seen them flying around our skies. We don't know what they are. And yeah, and as I've explained several times, this came up on the Kev Baker show the other day. Some of them may well be what Ben Rich says, ours. Alien reproduction vehicles, as the late Mark McCallish called them. It goes on. Second big lie, that the US does not have any aircraft or technologies that can perform in the manner the UAPs do. This is simply a cover-up of the fact that since the mid-1950s, unacknowledged special access projects, USAPs, have had exactly such operational classified craft. These craft have been used in... I'll stop there for a moment. Yes, they have. That's true. What's happened is that they firstly, anti-gravity technology was developed through the early 20th century. In Germany, it was specifically very advanced from the 1930s, from about 1930 onwards. They made enormous progress under the Nazis. That was then appropriated, it was stolen, it was pillaged by the victorious Allies at the end of World War II. And what's more, at the same time, I'm not so sure about this, there's less evidence for this, but it's possible that the studies of crash UFOs, like the Roswell instance and those that came before it and after it, because yes, Roswell was not the first Roswell, also led to development. It led to knowledge, which eased and speeded the development in this particular arms race. So that bit is true. So yeah, that bit is true. And indeed, that is a lie that is still going on. And I don't think the thing is, once we have disclosure, that's kind of the first domino. And I've covered this book before, no doubt I'll come back to it. I don't think it's possible for them to just stand up and say, oh, AONHCs are real, but that's it. The journalists are going to say, what about Roswell? The journalists are going to be putting their hands up in the press conference saying, it probably won't be the president, not with the fake president we have now, but whoever, if it's someone other than Biden, like Trump, if Trump comes back, etc., as I think he will. If it's not, it'll probably be some official from the Pentagon, and they'll say, Mr. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, say, what about Roswell? What happened here? What about the other things? What about the other these crash retrievals? What about this Area 51? What about the stuff that's, the nitinol, the stuff that the Bigelow's been coming out with, anti-Brigalia found? So, I mean, this second lie will not last long in a post-disclosure world, which is why they're so unwilling. That's one of the reasons they're so unwilling to have it. But anyway, Greer says this: these craft have been used in clandestine operations for 60 years, including the criminal staging of alien kidnappings and torture, quote-unquote alien, also known as alien abductions. Such false flag operations have been confirmed by intelligence officials and a 1980 CIA document. See the cosmic hoax to be released soon. Oh, it's been released now. Additionally, the energy and propulsion technologies behind such man-made UFOs, once disclosed, would lead to the end of oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, and other current energy systems, and begin a new energy economy. While this would be the salvation of the Earth and perhaps the long-term prospects of humanity, this would spell the end of the corrupt global elites and oligarchs who currently run the planet. Right, there's 2 points here. I should have actually paused after the first one. But anyway, the idea that the alien abduction phenomenon is the result of MILABs, that is military abductions, what's sometimes known as stagecraft, is false. This is one of Greer's biggest mistakes. I'm not saying MILABs are not true and do not happen, and there may even be some that are actually, under some particular individuals, for the purpose of this information, are subjected to them on a small scale, maybe for appearances in the media. However, the alien abduction phenomenon is actually nothing to do with the USAPs. The alien abduction phenomena is a perennial part of the human experience on Earth. It goes back way before 60 years. Betty and Barney Hill were not the first alien abductees. They were the first to be covered in the media in great detail, but it goes back throughout history. There's every reason to believe that alien abductions were taking place in prehistoric times. So that's where Greer gets it completely wrong. Now, what he says after that is completely true about energy propulsion technologies, which exist within the secret space program and the breakaway civilization, as Richard Dolan calls it, and the end of oil, gas, coal, nuclear power, etc. This is something I cover in detail in my novels, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and its 2 sequels. He's absolutely right about the second part, but it's not all a big lie. Anyway, and he carries on. Such a truthful disclosure would also expose the means whereby the same USAP-connected oligarchs could continue the hoax and eventually convince that, all right, he's coming on to the alien threat thing. Yeah, okay. But first, let me just comment that there's absolutely no doubt that the declassification of this technology would improve the quality of life for all people on Earth and for the environment. and for the Earth's natural world and the Earth's biosphere. There's absolutely no doubt about it. It's something that I think has to happen. But he goes on to say here, continue the hoax and eventually convince the vulnerable general public of an alien threat. This hoax, which began in the 1950s, has been part of a long-term covert military strategy to unite the world, not in peace, but around a militaristic response to this hoaxed alien threat. That's a possibility, I think, that we have to bear in mind as we examine this subject. Now, I've always said, we don't. If we Greer, you see, has made up his mind what all this is. He's 100% convinced of his assessment of new ufology. I personally think it's something we have to be wary of, but if at the same time, it's necessary to tread a middle ground between extreme naivety and extreme cynicism, because we don't want to fall for the fake alien invasion scenario, the last card, as Carol Rosin called it. But at the same time, if it is not that, and I'm open to the idea that Greer is wrong, and that's not what we're seeing right now. We are seeing a genuine breakdown of the truth embargo and a genuine step towards disclosure, as Steve Bassett explained. I think that this is if that's the case, it's an opportunity we can't afford to miss. And if we take Greer's position on this, we will miss that opportunity, because he basically is turning his back on any possibility of a genuine disclosure here. And that is a massive mistake. He goes on. And that leads us to the third big lie, that the UAPs are a threat to national security. What rubbish. If the ET threat was real, we would have known about it the day the first atomic bomb was detonated. As the first CIA director, Roscoe Hillenkotter, stated in the letter, the secrecy surrounding UFOs is a threat to the national security, not the UFOs. Except for the man-made ones that are being used in false flag operations, deceiving even our top military officials. The big lie is central to the long-term military strategy. Convince the world we must be united, again not in peace and real unity, but against an extraterrestrial threat. The result, a total global totalitarian superstate unites the world against the alien threat, just as Werner von Braun and Carol Rosin warned. Yeah, again, he goes into the fake alien invasion thing. But the thing is, I think there's some confusion. And I've already talked about the confusion over the term threat, which I think has led perhaps people to take the line that Stephen Greer talks about. I don't think simply referring to UAPs as a threat to national security is in itself evidence that this is they're planning a fake alien invasion. I think it's something we need to be wary of. We need to have at the back of our minds at all times, but not to embrace with 100% agreement, as Greer has done. And he carries on here. We must all unite to encourage our representatives and leaders in every country of the earth to avail themselves of the evidence and research of the Disclosure Project. Write to them today. And we need more brave whistleblowers to step forward with detailed information about these illegal operations immediately. If you are such a whistleblower, please contact us at seriousdisclosure.com. Okay. Firstly, he talks about we must unite and encourage our representatives and leaders. Right, okay. Write to them today. Okay. My, who is my MP? Annalisa Dodds. She's right up Keir Starmer's bottom. She totally and utterly. I don't trust her. I don't admire her. I think she's just a mainstream left of centre Labour hack. She's actually the shadow Home Secretary right now, I believe, and chairwoman of the Labour Party. So yeah, I'm not going to bother with her. I don't think she'd take me seriously. If you're lucky enough to have possibly another, I mean, they're not all MPs the same. Hashtag not all MPs. There are some good ones. There are some good congressmen and senators. There's Senator Harry Reid, for example, in the United States. There are several other people. There's those guys in Poland who are supporting David Icke. They're in the Polish Parliament, whatever it's called. Yeah, or was it Croatia? I can't remember. But there's somewhere in Eastern Europe. There's these elected representatives who are supporting David Icke. As for whistleblowers, yeah, I mean, things are looking up for whistleblowers at the moment. I think. I do hope that Assange and Snowden and that get freed soon. I don't know why Trump didn't pardon them. I hope he will when he comes back. But generally, I think any whistleblowers who come forward now are going to be treated a lot better. As I said in my Basis Project speech, we need a common law precedent. We basically need someone like to step out the secret government, blow the whistle, reveal classified information, go to court and get acquitted, or get a very light sentence due to mitigations. Once we have that, you're going to get a lot more. And we already have a situation where David Fravor and Alex Dietrich and Sean Cahill and all the others, I think, know they're in the clear now, because all the information they gave out was simply declassified. I don't believe those people will face any criminal charges. I don't think they'll face any court-martials or anything like that. I don't know if you'd be court-martialed post-service or not. I don't know, but you could still end up in trouble. You could end up in a court. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, but it's interesting. He says, I support actually Greer's call for whistleblowers, and by all means, yeah, contact if you are a whistleblower. Do contact SeriousDisclosure.com. But he says here, this is the interesting bit. He says here, he calls on leaders of every country on Earth to avail themselves of the evidence and research of the Disclosure Project, capital D, capital P. He does not say, see, I would put it differently. I would put it, leaders in every country on Earth to avail themselves of the evidence and research gathered by the ufological and exopolitical movement. But he's saying, no, it's the Disclosure Project. It's me. I've got the goods. I've got the goods, man. Yeah. So again, this is the problem I have with him. He's setting himself up again as the figurehead and the vanguard of this entire movement. And I think his nose has been put out of joint rather significantly by the fact that he's not the only one. I think that's what bothers him. I really do. I think there is that issue, and so Greer, I think, needs to just take a step back. Look, this is not about. Stop thinking it's all about him. It's about all of us. We have a mission, guys. We're a team, and that means sometimes you've got to pull your ego in. You've got to rein in that damn ego, and with him it's difficult because he can't really rein in his ego because. Greer doesn't actually have an ego. It's Greer's ego has him. There's nothing wrong with having an ego. Everyone needs an ego. If you have no ego, you have an incomplete personality. But you mustn't let it dominate. Yeah, it's not just about Dr. Stephen Greer anymore. And in fact, it never has been. He has every right to be proud of what he's achieved over 30 years now of doing this. But he's letting the whole thing go to his head. So I'd say the evidence and research of the ufological and exopolitical movement, which includes the Disclosure Project, includes the Paradigm Research Group, includes UFO Truth Magazine, it includes Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. It includes everything. Anyway, he carries on. It is time for universal peace, not endless war. It's a time for a new world of clean, boundless energy and justice for all. It's time to permanently approve the treaty to ban all weapons from space and preserve space for peace forever. It's a time for change, real progress, and a new world in which the future of humanity is directed by peace and not endless wars and lies. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. I mean, I think that's absolutely what I think is absolutely essential for us all. And I know some people will say, Ben, it's communism. No, it doesn't have to be. I know it does sound a little bit like on the surface, that paragraph does sound similar to what's coming out of Davos and various other and the think tanks, and the European Union, but it's not. I mean, this is the same. You see, it's the globalists actually they take very positive statements and adapt them for their own purposes, which is why they sound so similar to the real, genuine desire for a better world, a better future for humanity, and directed by the desire for peace, not endless wars and lies. The avoidance of war whenever possible. I mean, I don't believe it's possible to it may not be possible to avoid war entirely, but we can minimize it. We can leave it as a last resort rather than keep engineering them continuously, which is what governments are doing right now. So that is Dr. Stephen Greer. It says here, Stephen M. Greer, MD, founder of the Global Disclosure Project, 27th of June, 2021, Washington, D.C., www.seriousdisclosure.com. And then he ends with a little plug for the Cosmic Hoax and Expose, which I've already discussed in this video. Alright, now, this could be one of the most significant things that's actually happened in the last few years. This is a video. This is from a video called. It's from Channel 7 News Australia. It says Westall's 50-year-old UFO sighting emerges again. That's on 7 News Australia. I do recommend you go to YouTube and watch this. It's very easy to find. I won't include a link or anything, but basically, Mr. Greenwood has come forward publicly. Now, this I think is a real sign of the times. Andrew Greenwood was a teacher at the Westall School in 1966 when he, along with all his students who were in class that day, witnessed a UFO in a wooded area called the Grange near the school. It's a classic story, one of the most interesting UFO stories actually to come out in the world. And he then was basically harassed by the authorities. He had uniformed men who came to see him, saying, "Oh, you know, you think you saw a UFO, did you? Well, Mr. Greenwood, I think you were probably drunk on duty." I sound like Steve mumbling, don't I? "I think you were probably drunk on duty, and anything to do with UFOs is a steaming pile, absolute rubbish." Yeah. But basically, they said that they would report him. They'd say, "You're obviously drunk in class. We're going to report you to the local education authority. You'll lose your career as a teacher." As a result, Mr. Greenwood was terrified into silence, and that's understandable. I don't blame him for that. It's difficult to stand up to this kind of thing, and it's sad. It's a shame, but there you go. I don't condemn him. I don't judge him. He remained silent for over 55 years. But then, if you watched Phenomenon, James Cox's program, the video, the documentary Phenomenon, that's very, very good actually. He appears in it, just filmed the back of his head is the only thing shown. Well, since that, which it's actually a few months since that was filmed, that particular movie, he's decided to basically go the whole hog. He has appeared on Channel 7 News, full on, full frontal, his face visible, and he says exactly, you know, what he basically says is that everything these people have said is real. Now, his pupils have already come forward. There's a really good documentary called Westall 66, which came out a couple of years ago. They've all appeared in that. Probably after watching that, and he decided not to come forward, even though I'm sure they wanted him to back then. But since then, Mr. Greenwood, possibly because of the news stories about UAPs and things like that, has decided it's now safe and it's intelligent. It's the best. It's the right thing to do to come forward. And well done, Mr. Greenwood. Well done indeed. Do watch it. It's very interesting. It's only a short little clip, but he basically says the whole UFO story was true. I was a teacher. I wasn't just a little kid. I was a teacher at the school, and it was all true. This will hopefully encourage others. I think you're going to see more of this, actually. You're going to see more people like Mr. Greenwood speaking out. It's a sign of the times, like I said. So well done, Mr. Greenwood. I think it's time to put aside the, oh, they were just kids making up a prank story now. I mean, I put that aside before anyway. I mean, it's like the Rua kids, you know. They're all older. I mean, the Rua kids, this happened earlier. The Rua kids are like in their 20s and 30s. The Westall kids are now in their 60s. Mr. Greenwood's in his 70s. How many pranks did you make up when you were a little kid? And we all done it. We all did it when we were kids, didn't we? That you still maintain were real today. Not many, I think. Talking to Steve mumbling, I wonder what he makes of this.
And so that brings us to the end of another episode in this eternal novel, hopefully not eternal, but long-term and novel, another chapter in this book called UFO Disclosure 2021. This is actually now the 6th year that I've been doing this UFO Disclosure series, so it's the longest running series on Hapanwo TV. But hopefully it will come to an end at some point, with the UFO disclosure being something that's actually happening and not just coming. I still think that could happen. I'm still convinced that we may be closer now than ever before. And every time I talk to Steve Bassett, I always get that feeling. I really do. And you know, I think one day he's going to be right. Now, I'm off to Truth Seekers Northeast in a couple of days, so this will be my last video, probably for about a week. But don't fear, I will be back. And I have not only, I will be doing a reportage of Truth Seekers Northeast, and I've also got the reportage of Awake and Aware to do. So once I get back, I'll have time to edit those. So either one of those will probably be my next video. I'll probably do Awake and Aware first, because that's the one that's been waiting the longest, and then do Truth Seekers Northeast afterwards. But either expect at least 2 more videos from me in swift succession sometime next week, probably by the middle of next week. Okay, and in the meantime, I'm going to be at Truth Seekers Northeast. And obviously, that's a private event. So, but some of you watching, I know, will be going to that because you are members of Truth Seekers Northeast. If you can't, then of course I hope you enjoy the video. But there will be more coming from me very soon. Also, keep checking the Hapanwo Voice blog, and check out, and don't forget to buy the books, Roswell Rising, a novel of disclosure, and its 2 sequels. I'll see you again very soon. Thank you very much for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.